the night in the great world of American TV series. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76 Miracle. When Kay and Merlin rush back to Camelot day and night, Arthur's condition had worsened and was extremely serious. This time, King Uther refused to go to Arthur's room. It was not that King Uther did not love his son. On the contrary, King Uther was sadder than ever at this time. He just couldn't bear to watch Arthur fighting with death while he could only watch helplessly. He couldn't convince himself to face the scene of Arthur suffering from illness calmly, so he chose to escape. He was outside Arthur's room, but he couldn't muster up the courage to step into Arthur's room. King Uther supported the window and looked at the people gathered outside the palace. They all came to the door of the palace spontaneously to see off the prince. They held candles, lowered their heads, and prayed silently for Arthur, hoping that their prince would go well. On the other side, Gaius also walked out of Arthur's room after making his last effort. Only Morgana and some servants were left in the room to do the final washing for their prince. Obviously, no one had any hope now. Gaius felt bad watching his old friend standing in front of the window alone. But out of his responsibility, Gaius still walked gently behind King Uther, bowed slightly, and asked softly, "My Majesty, is there anything else I can do for you?" The subjects have begun to say goodbye to him. King Uther's voice was full of fatigue and sadness. Gaius opened his mouth, but in the end he could only say dryly, "He hasn't left yet, Your Majesty, but he can't be cured either. King Uther has no hope now. Maybe there is a miracle. Sir Kay has taken Merlin to help Arthur find the antidote. Maybe they will get something soon." The reason for Kay's departure could not be concealed. After all, he had been missing for almost a month, and at this time, the soldiers on the front line have all returned, but there is still no news from Kay. Even if King Uther is slow, he knows that there is a problem. So a long time ago, King Uther learned part of the truth from Gaius. He knew that Kay had left to find an antidote. It was also with this hope that King Uther did not despair after Arthur's condition worsened again. But now, King Uther has no courage anymore. Kay has been away for too long. "I don't believe in miracles." King Uther said this and was ready to turn around and leave. He had to find a place for Arthur in the cemetery of his ancestors. But just as he was about to leave, there was a commotion outside the palace. King Uther walked to the edge of the window and looked out. The people holding candles outside the palace to see Arthur off separated like a tide. Kay rode his warhorse on the road where the people separated and headed straight for the palace gate. Seeing his adopted son, King Uther, who had already despaired, raised hope again. He had no other choice now, and could only hope that Kay could bring him a miracle. Kay rushed into the palace in a dusty manner. Along the way, he went straight to Arthur's room without stopping. The scene in front of the palace had frightened him, and now he could only pray that Arthur was okay. When he rushed into Arthur's room, he was shocked by the scene inside. Morgana and a group of servants were in tears as they made the final arrangements for Arthur. They washed Arthur's body, put on the most gorgeous clothes for him, and smeared spices on his body. Spice application is not to roast Arthur. But there is such a custom in ancient times. I remember that it existed in Egypt and Europe. It is used for embalming. This is the rhythm of burial. If Kay could not see the rise and fall of Arthur's chest, he would really sit on the ground. "Kay!" Seeing Kay's appearance, Morgana immediately shouted in surprise. Just now, Morgana's mood was the same as King Uther's. They were all desperate, and Kay's appearance gave them the last hope. Kay did not have time to talk to Morgana. He just walked to Arthur's bedside and roughly pushed away the servants who were making the final preparations for Arthur. He pinched Arthur's cheeks, opened Arthur's mouth, and then took out a silver kettle filled with holy water from his arms and poured the holy water into Arthur's mouth. At first, Arthur was not able to swallow the holy water, but as the holy water was poured in, Arthur's swallowing instincts became stronger and stronger, and he began to swallow the holy water in big gulps. As the holy water was finished, Arthur's symptoms began to improve significantly. His face, which was originally pale and lifeless, showed a trace of blood. Although it still looked very bad, it was no longer like he was about to die at any time. Feeling that the toxins in Arthur's body began to weaken rapidly and his vitality was steadily increasing, Kay knew that Arthur was out of danger. As Arthur was out of danger, Kay's highly tense spirit finally relaxed, And then a feeling of fatigue surged into his heart. Kai could no longer hold on and fell directly on Arthur's bed. This scene happened to be seen by King Uther and Gaius, who came over, and the two old men were shocked. King Uther was worried that one of his sons was about to die. If the other son was in trouble, he would not have to live. Gaius was more worried. He knew what Kai was doing. He also knew the characteristics of ancient magic. He was afraid that Kai would use his life to exchange for Arthur's antidote. The two old men ran to Kai's side quickly. King Uther didn't even pay attention to Arthur. Instead, he hugged Kai and asked Gaius anxiously, "Look, what happened to Kai?" Gaius was not slow either. He had already done a full body check on Kai when King Uther hugged him. The results of the check came out soon, which made Gaius relieved. Although Kai had a cold and fever, it was not a big deal. He was just too tired and had a cold, so he couldn't hold on and fell asleep. "It's okay, there's nothing wrong with my body, I'm just too tired. I'll be fine after a rest." When Gaius said this, his eyes began to look around. He was looking for someone, looking for his stupid apprentice. He found that only Kai came back, but his stupid apprentice was nowhere to be seen. He wanted to ask Kai why he didn't see Merlin. But in this situation, he had no chance to ask. King Uther heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Gaius's diagnosis. He then immediately asked Morgana to take Kai back to rest. Morgana could no longer wait, and after hearing King Uther's order, she immediately took Kai back to the room. After Kai and the others left, King Uther took Gaius to diagnose Arthur. Gaius only realized at this time that there was another person here, and now was not the time to worry about where Merlin was. Although Gaius was basically sure that Arthur would be fine, after all, Kai came back so tired, it was naturally impossible for him to return empty-handed. But what should be done still needs to be done. After examining Arthur, Gaius said to King Uther very happily, "That's great, Your Majesty. All the poisons in Arthur's body have been cleared. I believe that Arthur will recover soon." King Uther didn't bother to figure out where Kai got the antidote from at this time. He just kept saying, "That's great, that's great, that's great." King Uther, who had relaxed, felt weak all over, but this was not because he was sick, but because he was too happy and felt a little at a loss. After a while, King Uther came to his senses. He asked Gaius to go down and give Kai a more detailed examination, and prescribe medicine for Kai to treat his cold, while he stayed with Arthur. Thanks to Xioxia Obeogian for the reward, and book friend 20170712185302434 for the 3 rewards. Chapter 77 Recovery. 3 days later, Merlin returned to Camelot amid Gaius's worry. As for why he returned 3 days later than Kai, the reason was very simple. When Kai and Merlin were on their way, they happened to encounter rainy days. Since Great Britain is an island country and the Gulf Stream carries a lot of water flowing through its surrounding seas, the probability of rainfall is very high. The average annual rainfall is more than 1,000 millimeters across the island. November and December are the months with the most rainfall. Moreover, the winter in Great Britain is also quite powerful. Although it is raining, the temperature is still very low. Coupled with a strong wind, the raindrops falling on the body are almost like knives. If they can choose, most people living here are willing to snow, because once it rains, the body will easily get wet, and the body will not be able to keep any temperature, which is definitely much colder than on snowy days. In this environment, it is murder for a weak chicken like Merlin to travel. So at the beginning, they also walked and stopped. Finally, Kai couldn't wait any longer, so he simply let Merlin walk slowly by himself and he went all out to travel alone. Although Merlin, the weakling, wanted to follow, his weak nature determined that he was powerless. He caught a cold halfway. Although he had the potion prepared by Gaius, it would not cause any problems, but following Kai on the road with all his strength was definitely courting death. In the end, Kai left Merlin in an inn in a town and returned to Camelot first. It was also because of this that Kai fell ill after returning to Camelot. Logically speaking, with Kai's attributes and measurements, this situation would not have happened at all, but when he used the Holy Grail before, the Holy Grail extracted his vitality and soul power, which seriously injured his vitality and body into a weak period. In addition, he had been overloaded on the road and worried about Arthur's situation, so he really got sick. When Merlin returned to Camelot alive and well, the gap was revealed. Kai was exhausted on the road, braving the wind and rain, and made himself sick. And what about Merlin? Not only did nothing happen, but he was 3 days late, and even gained a little weight in the end. How could the biased King Uther tolerate this? A knight like Kay had been in such a mess to save Arthur, and you, a servant, were living more comfortably than the knight. What kind of thing is this? So less than half an hour after Merlin came back, he was ordered by King Uther to be dragged to the square and continue his daily life as the little prince of the square. These days, because of the absence of Merlin, the rotten leaves and fruits in Camelot had to be wasted, which made the citizens a little uncomfortable. Those rotten leaves and fruits were thrown on Merlin, which was a use, not a waste. Now that Merlin finally came back, the accumulated enthusiasm of the masses overwhelmed Merlin at once. Overwhelmed in various senses. It is said that Merlin was finally rescued by the soldiers because he was buried in the rotten leaves and fruits and could not get out by himself. It was also because of Merlin's move that the atmosphere in the palace, which had been gloomy recently, was much better. At least many people laughed. This also included Arthur. Ha ha ha, what are you doing? You're punished as soon as you come back. Arthur sat cross-legged on the bed, eating and laughing at Merlin's experience. Merlin had just finished a shower, and his hair was still wet. Seeing Arthur laughing at him, he turned his head to shake off the water on his head, and then glared at Arthur fiercely. It was considered revenge. If he hadn't almost died, he would have really wanted to choke him. After laughing for a while, Arthur put away his smile and looked at Merlin very seriously. Thank you, Merlin. Although Arthur didn't know the whole story of the antidote, Merlin and Kay went together to help him find the antidote, which was the greatest favor to him. He had to say thank you. Arthur's sudden seriousness made Merlin a little uncomfortable. He hurriedly brought the food to the bedside, and finally managed to say, "No, this is what I should do. No, this is not your responsibility. You treat me as a friend and help me regardless of the danger." "Thank you, Merlin, I'm serious." Arthur is not stupid. Even Kai was sick from exhaustion this time. You can imagine how much Merlin, as a weak chicken, suffered. According to his duties, Merlin is just a servant, and there is no need to suffer that. But he still went, and Arthur certainly knew why he was there. Merlin calmed down at that time. He suddenly felt that it was nothing to be punished by King Uther before. He went with Kai to find the antidote, not because of King Uther at all. He did not need King Uther to affirm his achievements. He did it for Arthur. Now Arthur's thank you made Merlin feel that his efforts were worthwhile. But Merlin, like all boys, did not like that kind of corny words. So he deliberately rolled his eyes and handed the plate in his hand to Arthur. "You still have the heart to say these nonsense now? Don't you know that Sir Kay is very angry about what you did this time? Whether it was the previous war between the two countries, or the fight against a monster this time, which almost killed him, Sir Kay will remember it for you. I heard from Gwen that Kay couldn't help but come to you for trouble while he was in bed. If Princess Morgana hadn't persuaded him, you would have been beaten half to death by Sir Kay by now. Now that you are almost recovered from your illness, I think Sir Kay will come to you soon. Do you still have the heart to laugh?" Merlin's venomous tongue is not to be underestimated. With just one sentence, Arthur's originally happy mood was kicked to the bottom. Arthur caused such a big mess before, and Kay didn't forget it, but because he was fighting on the front line, he didn't care about trouble with him. After that, when Kay finally solved the war on the front line, Arthur almost played himself to death again. Kay could only go through a lot of hardships to save his life. For this, Kay even made himself sick. Arthur started the war first, and then not only almost killed himself, but also made the whole royal family in chaos. These two crimes combined were enough for Kai to break Arthur's legs. I don't think I'm well yet. I need to rest. I can't do it anymore. Merlin, go find Gaius and help me. I'm not well yet. Not well yet." Arthur fell on the bed and kept rolling around on the bed. Whenever he thought of Kai now, his liver trembled. For the sake of his own life, he thought it would be better for him to pretend to be sick. "Oh? You're not well yet? Let me see." Just when Arthur was throwing a tantrum, Kai came to his room without knowing when. Arthur looked at Kai, who was already full of murderous intent, as if he was petrified. After a while, he looked at Merlin for help. He hoped that Merlin would help him get help. "When I was traveling outside, I learned some medical skills, very magical medical skills. In just a moment, I guarantee that your illness will be cured." Kai cracked his mouth, revealing a ferocious smile, and then pulled out his belt. Then Arthur accepted Kai's treatment of love under Merlin's helpless expression. "Help. Stop hitting me. I know I'm wrong, don't I?" After 2 months, the palace of Camelot was full of vitality again, especially Arthur's loud and powerful screams, which made everyone feel the vitality. Chapter 78 Lively. Since Arthur recovered, the whole Camelot has entered a peaceful period. The war has gone away from them, the monsters have been eliminated, and the civilians are ready for winter. Although Camelot is not peaceful this year, they have overcome all difficulties. The autumn harvest is also a bumper harvest. In addition, the victory in the war has led to Camelot receiving generous war compensation, which has given many soldiers' families enough money to spend this winter. So although the weather is getting colder, the city is getting more and more lively. Camelot will also usher in a grand event, the Knights' Conference. The triennial Knights' Conference is finally going to be held again. Every Knights' Conference will be held before the new year, and this year's conference is no exception. Because there are particularly many knights who signed up for this Knights' Conference, the opening was chosen to be December 15th, and then after 15 days of competition, a champion knight will be produced. When the Knights' Conference is over, it will be the Celtic New Year's Eve, December 31st, which is the Celtic New Year. This is the most important festival for the Celtics. On this day, people will celebrate all day, and the ringing of the bell at midnight means the beginning of the new year. In Kai's opinion, this festival is similar to the spring festival in his previous life. They are all celebrating the new year. Moreover, the name of New Year's Eve is not made up by Kai. Others really call it this name. This festival still exists in modern Scotland, and it is also the most traditional festival in Scotland. Others really call it this name. In other words, starting from December 15th, the whole Camelot will enter a carnival lasting half a month. However, for many people, these 15 days are not easy. As the opening time of the Knights' Conference is getting closer, more and more knights are rushing to Camelot. This has led to a surge in the flow of people in Camelot. These knights are not alone. Even the worst of them will bring a squire. Some wealthy knights will bring more squires. In addition, many nobles from other places will also come here because of their reputation. These nobles have more entourages, which leads to the fact that the hotels in Camelot are full in early December. The knights who come later can only rent houses of some civilians or merchants. This made the civilians in the city make a lot of money before the New Year's Eve. With so many people pouring into Camelot, they certainly needed people to provide services for eating, drinking, defecating and urinating. In this way, many civilians who had nothing to do in the winter could earn some extra money. Of course, in addition to boosting the economy, the influx of these outsiders also brought some bad effects. Fights occurred frequently in the city. Most of these knights were rookies who came to Camelot just to make a name for themselves. Each of them was extremely confident in themselves, and at the age of blood and vigor, it was naturally impossible for them to be good children, so frictions and quarrels were very common. Most people in this era were the kind of macho men who would start fighting after just a few words. Fighting became commonplace, and death was common. So this made Kai suffer. He had already replaced Arthur as the commander of the Camelot Knights, and the security in the city was under his control. For these energetic knights, Kai had not slept well for almost half a month. This group of tough guys made Camelot a mess. After drinking a few cups of horse urine, these guys started to make trouble. Fights were common in public. Now the average number of abnormal deaths in Camelot is 3.5 people every day, and the cause of death is fighting. Kai has to deal with 20 to 30 cases of fighting and injury, or even death, every day. Kai, a legitimate policeman, wants to throw these bastards into the dungeon as if they were gang members. But this is BC, and knights have privileges. Kai can't punish them. The most he can do is to subdue them and release them when they calm down. Unless they hurt the civilians of Camelot, Kai really doesn't have any good way. Fortunately, King Uther had issued an order a long time ago that no knight was allowed to duel privately before the Knights' Assembly, so even if there was a fight, the knights were still restrained, and most of the unlucky people who died were servants. But Kai had no right to judge the squire's loss of life, because the squire's life belonged to the knight. Unless the knight took the initiative to ask Kai to do justice, Kai could do nothing. Those stubborn knights rarely sought justice through official channels. They preferred to do it themselves in a duel. Therefore, before the Knights' Conference began, the gunpowder smell between the knights was already very strong, which is why the death rate of each Knights' Conference remained high. These guys did not regard the Knights' Conference as a competition at all. They regarded the Knights' Conference as a Knights' duel conference. Once they were on the field, there was no such thing as holding back. But then again, people of this era still like this tune, and King Uther was a representative figure. He liked to see the knights fighting selflessly. Kai actually didn't like this atmosphere, which was fundamentally different from the sports games of later generations. It was barbaric and bloody, which made Kai, a policeman who had been in the police force for so many years, very uncomfortable. But this was the social atmosphere at that time, and Kai was powerless. He could only stop those fights as much as possible, so that those hot-blooded reckless men could calm down a little. Just as Kai stopped to fight, someone sent a message that two nobles wanted to duel for unknown reasons. Both sides were unwilling to give in under the persuasion of the Camelot knights, and wanted Kai to be a witness. If the knights were hot-blooded and easily got carried away, then the nobles were not much better. These people were deeply influenced by the spirit of chivalry. They did not like to find official ways to solve any problems, but were more keen to solve them with duels. Moreover, most of the duels were caused by trivial matters. These days, although the knight conference had not started, the knight duel field was not deserted. Every day, nobles initiated duels in the knight duel field because of some messy things. This was a hard time for Kai. Not only did he have to deal with the fights that happened one after another every day, but he also had to go to the knight duel field to act as a witness. There was no other way, because Kai had now established a title of the first knight of the Celtic countries. Many knights and nobles felt that it was a very face-saving thing to let Kai come to witness the duel. When Kai arrived at the arena, he saw a familiar face. Gwen was waiting at the door of the arena, and when she saw Kai, she immediately ran over. Kai was very curious. She was Morgana's maid. Why didn't she stay with Morgana at this time and ran to the arena? Gwen? Why are you here? Chapter 79 The Charm of a Rolling Girl. It turns out that this duel is related to Gwen. The matter is very simple and also very bloody. Recently, all the knights have come to Camelot, which makes Gwen's father's blacksmith shop do very well. This grand event that happens once every 3 years has benefited all aspects of Camelot, and blacksmiths are no exception. The knights' swords need professional maintenance and armor needs to be repaired, which all cost money. Morgana happened to have nothing to do recently, so she simply gave Gwen a vacation and asked her to help the family and make more money. But today is only the first day, and something happened. When the rolling girl was helping in the blacksmith shop at home, she was molested by a noble. When Kai heard this, he was very surprised. What kind of look did this shitty noble have? Has he never seen a woman? Even the rolling girl was molested? After all, he is a noble. Is his taste really that strange? The rolling girl was concentrating on narrating what happened at the moment, and didn't notice Kai's expression at all. Otherwise, I would probably die of heartache. Kai also realized that his reaction was too rude. Although the other person is not beautiful, what's wrong with someone liking her? Is it illegal? Although Kai put away his strange expression, he was still muttering in his heart, with this beauty of Gun-Niang, isn't it good for the noble to be favored by her? In Kai's opinion, the most important thing for Gun-Niang to do is to obey the noble. If someone likes her, why hesitate? Kai was still complaining, while Gun-Niang continued to tell the whole story. In Gun-Niang's description, a girl like her who was naturally beautiful naturally could not tolerate others teasing, but seeing that the other party was a noble, she could not react too much, so she could only dodge with tears. It was at this time that a righteous knight stood up and presided over justice for Gun-Niang. The noble was beaten by the knight who was brave enough to do justice, and then the matter was simple. The noble was not convinced, so he initiated a duel. So, do you want me to arrest that knight? Kai was still immersed in his own world. He thought that Gun-Niang must blame the knight for ruining her good deeds, so he blurted out. What? This sentence contained too much information, and Gun-Niang thought she had misheard for a moment. Kai immediately reacted, as if he had said the truth in his heart. So he quickly made amends. Ahem, I mean, what do you want me to do? Gun-Niang heard it very clearly, and Kai definitely didn't say this sentence just now, but she was not sure what Kai said before, but she didn't have time to dwell on it. She begged, I hope you can help end this duel. I don't want that person to get hurt for me. Well, this sentence is a bit. In short, Kai always felt that something was wrong, but it was hard to say what. That would be too rude. You said he was a knight. Kai abandoned the random things in his mind and asked seriously. He said he was. I don't remember, but he took out the family emblem, so he should be a knight. Gun-Niang thought about it, and in that environment at that time, her heart was in a mess, and she didn't remember what the knight said at all. But she remembered that the knight took out his family emblem, which should be correct. Then I can't do anything. Although Kai always felt that the chivalry of this era was really nonsense, he lived in such a society. And he couldn't change the rules of this society for thousands of years. Since he is a knight, once he accepts the duel, he must complete it. This is stipulated in the Knight's Code. With the current situation, Kai is really powerless. Moreover, it is still during the Knights' Conference. If Kai forcibly stops the duel, it will only lead to opposition from the entire knight class. Duel is sacred. Although Kai does not think that there is anything sacred about two people fighting for life and death for a little thing, the rules are like this. You can dislike it, but you can't violate it. Really, there is no way? Gun Niang immediately burst into tears, obviously feeling uneasy and guilty about provoking this duel. Beauty is indeed the original sin. Seeing Gun Niang's face that is similar to the doorman of the police station in his previous life, Kai couldn't muster up the energy even if he wanted to be gentle with her, and even wanted to run away. Can you imagine a doorman imitating Lin Dayou? Kai saw it now. Damn, how did that bastard think of teasing Gun Niang? Was his brain caught in the door? Kai pulled the corner of his mouth and said, "It can't be changed. All you can do now is pray for him." After that, he walked into the arena without caring about Gun Niang's reaction. He was afraid that he couldn't hold it in. Both parties in the duel couldn't wait any longer and had been waiting in the arena for a long time, waiting for Kai to come and start. Kai asked the names of both parties according to the provisions of the Knight's Code. The noble was just a minor role and didn't need to be taken seriously. Besides, he was not one of the two protagonists of the duel. In this era, noble lords rarely participated in duels. After all, the lord was the monarch. If the monarch died in the duel, it would be a big deal. Therefore, when noble lords initiated a duel, they would let their knights replace them. The lord appointed the knights for this purpose. To put it bluntly, the knights were thugs. If the lord had to handle everything himself, what else did the knights do? The knight who was going to fight on behalf of the noble stood up and said his name. Griffin, another knight, the one who stood up for the girl, also said his name, Gawain. To be honest, after seeing Gawain, Kai once began to doubt his own aesthetics. He wondered if it was because he was an Oriental person that he could not understand the aesthetics of Westerners. Because when he saw Gawain, there was only one word in Kai's mind. That is handsome. He had long flowing hair and a handsome appearance, especially his eyes. The brown pupils were not uncommon, but the sparkling light in them made people feel comfortable at the sight of them. Coupled with his always naughty smile, the women and girls watching the game around him all had stars in their eyes and screamed continuously. Although he looked like a pretty boy, he was not weak. On the contrary, he had a tall and strong figure, especially his chest muscles were extremely developed, and his masculinity was bursting. Kai didn't understand why such a handsome man would blow a kiss to his mother. Well, after seeing that the girl was cheering for him, the boy kept flirting with her and blowing kisses. If it wasn't a duel, the boy would have gone even further. The girl was also teased by the boy and her face turned red, right? Anyway, it was dark and it was hard to tell whether it was red or not. But judging from her expression, she must be shy. Seeing the interaction between the two, Kai fell into deep self-doubt. Is it really his problem? Kai also took the time to take a closer look at the girl, but still couldn't see anything. In the end, Kai gave up. Everyone has their own preferences. Although Kai didn't agree, he didn't think of interfering. If this boy really likes the girl, it would be a blessing for the girl. After all, they are acquaintances, and Kai is sincerely happy for the girl. It's rare to find such a handsome partner these days. After ending these crazy thoughts, Kai announced the start of the duel. Gawain is really handsome. British TV dramas are like this, with a lot of handsome guys. Chapter 80 The Inflated Roller. The knight named Gawain had the upper hand at the beginning of the battle. Although his moves looked more like wild ones and not as upright as those of orthodox knights, Kai could still tell from his steps and the posture of drawing the sword that this guy had very solid basic skills. Knight Griffin was relatively mediocre. He was a typical traditional knight with big and powerful moves. But compared with Gawain, he lacked some flexibility. At the beginning of the battle, he had always wanted to use force to defeat cleverness and suppress Gawain. But Gawain used his skills to cleverly remove Knight Griffin's moves and waited for an opportunity to launch a counterattack. Less than 3 minutes after the duel began, Gawain seized an opportunity, drew circles with his sword in one hand, and used clever strength to pick up Knight Griffin's long sword. After Griffin's long sword left his hand, He was not ready to give up and planned to grab his long sword back to continue the duel, but Gawain was obviously one step faster than him. He took the long sword that was picked up first and put his long sword on Tryfan's neck. Stop! The duel had reached this point and there was no need to continue, so Kai immediately called a halt to the match. Gawain heard Kai's call, retracted his sword, and threw Tryfan's sword to him, then ignored Tryfan, turned around and raised his hands to signal the audience around him. For a knight with superb skills, the people of Camelot never hesitated to applaud and cheer, and even many ladies began to throw handkerchiefs and personal items into the field as a reward for the winner. This showy guy seemed to enjoy these cheers very much, and he was not uncomfortable at all. He also picked up a flower from the ground and walked directly to the excited girl. This is simply a naked insult. It is an insult to Knight Tryfan. It is not shameful to lose. In fact, the loser of a knight's duel is not as shameful as imagined. It is just that the skills are not as good as others. There is nothing to be ashamed of. But Gawain's attitude of turning a blind eye was different. As a witness of this duel, before Kai announced the winner, Gawain turned around and left, and began to celebrate, without giving his opponent the slightest respect. Knights are generally not afraid of death. No matter how this profession is beautified, it cannot cover up the fact that the class of knights is born for violence. Death in battle is the most reasonable destination for knights. No knight will be afraid of this. If you are really afraid, don't come out to be a knight. But knights attach great importance to honor and dignity. Isn't this what people pursue in their lives? So when Gawain humiliated himself like this, Knight Tryfan finally couldn't help it. Knights are all violent, and it is not uncommon to kill people if they disagree. Knight Tryfan grabbed the long sword dropped by Gawain and rushed to Gawain from behind. The audience at the scene immediately discovered that something was wrong, so they screamed immediately. Gawain also reacted at this time and immediately turned around to prepare for the enemy, but unfortunately he was still a step too slow. Tryfan was extremely fast in his rage. When Gawain turned around, Tryfan's long sword had already chopped in front of Gawain. Everyone around covered their eyes, unwilling to see the tragedy happen. But at this time, a long sword appeared in front of Gawain and blocked the attack of Knight Tryfan. The sparks from the intersection of the two swords made Gawain subconsciously close his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, Kai had already blocked Gawain behind him. Knight Tryfan, please pay attention to your identity. The duel is over. Kai's appearance made Knight Tryfan sober up immediately. The duel was lost, and Tryfan could not refute this at all. As a qualified knight, he had not fallen to the point of lying with his eyes open. Losing is losing, which is nothing, but if you lose and don't admit it, it will be embarrassing. In fact, he was angry and attacked after losing just now, which was embarrassing enough. If he still refuses to give in front of the first knight of all nations, then he, as a knight, will be too ashamed to continue. Knight Tryfan had just calmed down, but Gawain was not. You bastard, die! The sword just now made Gawain feel the threat of death. If Kai had not appeared in time, he might have confessed. So under the fear, endless anger was born. With Kai still there, Gawain raised his sword and bypassed Kai to go straight to Tryfan's head. Kai was still talking to Tryfan, and suddenly there was a gust of wind behind him. Before he could turn his head, a sword passed through him and chopped Tryfan's head. Kai was so confused at this moment. These knights were so damn difficult to deal with. He saved Gawain's life, so naturally he couldn't watch Tryfan die, so Kai could only grab Gawain's sword holding hand, grab it, throw Gawain directly to the ground, and then hold him down. Enough. The duel is over. Be quiet. Gawain did not intend to let Tryfan go. Even though he was held down by Kai, he still struggled, swearing with some slang and swear words. Generally speaking, people who have received knight education rarely say such vulgar words. INF% and you at %. Tryfan had calmed down, but when he heard Gawain's insults, he became furious again and rushed forward to fight Gawain to the death. Fortunately, the knights of Camelot had rushed over and pulled Gawain and Tryfan apart. Throw these two bastards into the dungeon and let them calm down. Seeing the two bastards who were still swearing at each other after being pulled apart by everyone, Kai didn't have much patience, so he simply threw the two bastards into the prison to calm down. Yes, Kai now misses his job in his previous life. Although the job of criminal police sounds a bit dangerous, it is definitely 100 times better than the present life. At least in that world, no one would be as barbaric as the Celts. They could take someone's life for a little thing, and even lose their life for a verbal fight. Don't you think it's scary? What's more outrageous is that people of this era not only don't think it's wrong, but also highly praise it and regard it as an honor. It's really sick. Just after the two swearing guys were taken away, Kai saw that something happened with the rolling girl again. This time it wasn't that someone was teasing her again, but that she was arguing with someone very excitedly, as if she was arguing about something. When Kai saw the person arguing with the rolling girl clearly, it was even more strange. That person was actually Arthur. Why would Arthur argue with a maid? Kai walked over curiously to see what happened. As soon as he approached, he heard the rolling girl's voice. "You can't put Gawain in the dungeon. He did nothing wrong." Chapter 81 depressed Arthur. Kai was stunned. He didn't expect that this girl was actually standing up for Gawain. At this time, Arthur also saw Kai, and he immediately said to the rolling girl, "It's useless for you to tell me about this. Kai is here, you can tell him." Although this sentence is normal and there is nothing wrong with it, for some reason, Kai always feels that Arthur is trying to cover up something, as if he is hiding from him and doesn't want him to know something. Before Kai can continue thinking about it, the rolling girl could no longer contain her excitement and rushed to Kai's side. "Sir Kai, I think Gawain has done nothing wrong. He should not be treated the same as that shameless knight." The rolling girl's attitude stunned Kai. In the past, the rolling girl was very afraid of Kai. In front of Kai, let alone arguing so fiercely, she didn't even dare to speak loudly. Is this the power of love? Why shouldn't they? Did they make the same mistake? I don't think there's anything wrong with my punishment. If you think there is, you can appeal to the king, but love does not mean that you can do whatever you want. Although Gawain can't be said to have made a mistake, Kay can see that he is also a troublemaker. If he is not thrown into jail to calm down, who knows what will happen. Kay is not on the habit of indulging the rolling girl. At this time, the rolling girl seemed to have sobered up from her excitement. Sir Kay was not Arthur. Arthur would give in to her, but Sir Kay would never. Ever since the last time the rolling girl and Arthur went to Elder together, the two have had a good impression of each other. The rolling girl admired Arthur's kindness and bravery, while Arthur liked the rolling girl's strength and simplicity. After that, Arthur was imprisoned in the dungeon, and the rolling girl went to take care of Arthur, which quickly heated up their relationship. They both knew that the other party was interested in them, but no one had broken the window paper. Today, the news that the rolling girl was molested soon reached Arthur's ears. How could Arthur tolerate this? So he immediately ran out with a sword, intending to seek justice for the rolling girl and show off in front of the beauty. Arthur thought well, but the reality was not as smooth as he thought. When he arrived at the scene, he found out that someone had already saved the beauty first, which made Arthur very frustrated. He finally arrived at the arena and saw his favorite person cheering excitedly for another man. He even saw that bastard holding flowers and walking towards the rolling girl, which made Arthur almost explode on the spot. He rushed over at that time. If the pretty boy dared to do anything excessive to the rolling girl, he would throw out the iron gloves and duel with the bastard. But fortunately, this did not happen. Arthur calmed down at this time. If he dared to duel with others for the rolling girl in front of Kai, then what would happen to him? Arthur didn't even dare to think about it. And more importantly, Arthur knew very well that Kai would not agree to the rolling girl being with him. Because Uther would not agree, Arthur did not dare to think about what the rolling girl would face at that time. So now Arthur felt guilty, and he did not dare to show any abnormality. And what about Kai? He did not think about it at all. At least in Kai's mind, how could Arthur be involved with a rolling girl? Impossible. So although he felt that Arthur was a little strange, he did not think much about it, just thought that this guy could not stand the loneliness and ran out secretly again. Why are you not training at this time and running here? Uther attaches great importance to your participation in this competition. As for the reason, you should know it very well, so don't make trouble for me. Go back to training honestly. You must win the championship this time. It is impossible that the trouble Arthur caused some time ago has no sequelae. Although the war with the kingdom of Sendrud has been perfectly resolved by Kai, this cannot erase the mistakes Arthur made in this matter. If it were not for the incident of the water-seeking beast, Arthur risked his life to get back some points, and now it is estimated that many people would have complaints. After all, what Arthur did at the beginning was not only serious in consequence, but also very stupid. This night conference is a good opportunity for Arthur to turn things around. As long as he can win the title of champion knight in front of the people of Camelot, his reputation will rise immediately. At least it can offset the previous unfavorable situation. During this period of time, King Uther has been holding Arthur and asking him to train with Kai, and he must win the championship in one fell swoop. This is not just a game. For Arthur, this is a political task to establish his status as the orthodox heir. So whether it is King Uther, Morgana or Kai, they all attach great importance to this. In the past, Morgana would find ways to create opportunities for Arthur to be lazy, but these days, Morgana is even more nervous than King Uther. She began to actively urge Arthur and began to arrange Arthur's diet in person. In short, Arthur should not be here at this moment. Arthur was scolded by Kai and could only return to the training ground of the knights in disgrace and vent his depression in training. On the other hand, because of Kai's wake-up call, Gunnyong also began to reflect on her behavior. At the same time, she also began to re-examine her relationship with Arthur. It must be said that Arthur's cautiousness towards her before made her a little proud. She herself could not imagine that she dared to question Kai's decision in front of him. Although she still thinks that Kai was wrong to lock up Gawain, she would never have questioned Kai in person before. Because she did not have the courage, let alone the right and position. After Kai drove Arthur away, the rolling girl immediately realized one thing, that is, the gap between her and Arthur. She was just a servant, and Arthur was a prince. Although it was a bit sad, the rolling girl still forced herself to suppress these things. What she had to do now was to help Gawain. She felt that it was because of her that Gawain was imprisoned, so she had to rescue him. Of course, she now knew very well that she had no ability at all. At that time, she naively hoped that Arthur would order Gawain to be released, but now she realized how naive she was. However, things are not without variables. She herself does not have this ability, but someone does. Princess Morgana. She did it as soon as she thought of it, and the rolling girl immediately found Morgana. But Princess Morgana was not found, but Gunnyong knew another more serious matter. That is, Gawain lost a qualification to participate in the Knights' Conference because of the duel before the game. This made Gunnyong panic immediately. If Gawain was imprisoned, he would only suffer a little, but losing the qualification to participate in the Knights' Conference would directly affect Gawain's future. This is definitely a huge blow to Knight. The Knights' Conference has become a grand event for knights. In each session, there will be young knights who stand out from the Knights' Conference and are appreciated by the noble lords, and thus get real titles and become fiefdom knights. Knights with only titles and knights with fiefdoms are completely two classes, and it can even be said that there is a world of difference. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82, Plea. I have to say that Gunnyong's idea is very good. It is easier to get things done with someone in the court. Morgana's work efficiency is high, and Gawain was soon brought before the king. When Gawain stepped into the palace, the whole royal family was waiting for him. Greetings to you, your majesty. When Gawain saluted King Uther, his etiquette was fine, but his tone was very frivolous, and there was no fear and respect for the royal power that ordinary people had in his words. He didn't even use humble words, such as your loyal servant Gawain. Instead, there was an unspeakable irony in his words. King Uther frowned. He didn't like this young man. He was too frivolous. Both his words and his behavior were far from the traditional chivalry that King Uther said he respected. However, as a king, King Uther still had the grace he should have. After all, Gawain was not a vassal under his command, and now was the time for knights from various countries to gather. He was unwilling and would not punish him for such a small matter. Welcome to Camelot, Knight Gawain. I hope you will say your name before greeting next time. King Uther just stabbed Gawain a little, and then asked the knight beside him to hand over Gawain's ID. After the last incident with Lancelot, Camelot has been much stricter in this regard. But fortunately, Gawain's ID was not a problem at all. His father was indeed a knight of his country. Although he died in battle many years ago, Gawain inherited the title of knight. Although he did not have the king's fiefdom, he was indeed a member of the noble class. Gawain did not care about King Uther's sarcasm. Instead, he stared at the faces of the women in the hall, and even Morgana. However, when he saw Kai standing next to Morgana, he immediately changed his expression, nodded to Kai, and stopped staring at Morgana. Gawain naturally knew who saved his life, so he did not act presumptuously towards Kai's fiancée. Although he was a little dissolute, he was not heartless. But then, he began to stare at the girl unscrupulously. His bold look made Gunnyong so embarrassed that she didn't know where to put her hands. From time to time, she glared at Gawain fiercely, asking him to be honest. The two of them exchanged glances, but other people didn't pay much attention to it, but two people noticed it. One was Morgana. At first, Morgana was a little dissatisfied with Gawain's rudeness. Although she recognized Gawain's previous bravery, it didn't mean that Gawain could be rude to her. But she soon discovered the situation between Gawain and Gunnyong. This discovery made Morgana suddenly happy. The relationship between Morgana and Gunnyong is called best friends in the words of later generations. Although they are master and servant in name, they are actually sisters, and the relationship between the two is very good. Seeing that the two seemed to have something going on, Morgana was sincerely happy for Gunnyong. Although Gawain was just a down-and-out knight, he had the status of a noble, and he was handsome and had a sense of justice. He was definitely a very good object for Gunnyong. Thinking of this, Morgana immediately loved Gawain and thought that Gawain was pretty good. But another person didn't think so, that was Arthur. Arthur saw the flirting between the Gunnyong and Gawain, and he almost couldn't suppress his anger and challenged Gawain. Fortunately, Kay and King Uther were there. Although Arthur was jealous, he didn't dare to be presumptuous. "Knight Gawain, may I know why you came to Camelot?" King Uther asked Gawain why he came to Camelot after checking his ID the Knights' Assembly. "My Majesty." Gawain was also very happy. King Uther raised his eyebrows and asked expressionlessly, "Oh, then do you know that the decree of Camelot stipulates that any participant of the Knights' Assembly cannot duel in private, otherwise he will be disqualified?" "Yes, I know," Gawain still answered calmly. "Then I now declare that you are disqualified from participating in the Knights' Assembly. Are you convinced?" King Uther did not like any behavior that violated the law. He always believed that the promulgation of the law was for people to obey. Gawain was mentally prepared for this. In fact, he did not pay much attention to this Knights' Conference. He came to the Knights' Conference more to see the world. No matter what, as a knight, he liked to fight with high-level opponents. But he didn't care about other things. He didn't want to be a vassal of a king. He didn't have any good feelings for nobles and kings. He liked the life of wandering around the world and hated to see the hypocrisy of those nobles who were high above. But just when Gawain was about to accept King Uther's punishment, Morgana stood up. "Your Majesty, I don't think this matter can be judged so simply. Gawain's behavior did violate the law, but he had his reasons, so he is qualified to be forgiven." Morgana stood up. Except for Gawain, no one else in the hall was surprised. After all, the reason why Gawain was brought here was originally because of Morgana. Arthur and Kay knew best that the biggest reason why Morgana spoke for Gawain was because of Goblin. If it wasn't for Goblin, who did Morgana know Gawain was? Kay was non-committal about this. He didn't care about Gawain. Kai didn't know that Gawain would become one of the most famous knights among the Knights of the Round Table in the future. Arthur's thoughts were much more complicated. On the one hand, he agreed with Morgana's statement that Gawain had a duel to teach the nobles who teased Goblin a lesson. On this point, Arthur agreed very much both in public and in private, and even abandoned some personal feelings. Arthur applauded Gawain. Secondly, because of Gawain's enthusiasm for Goblin, Arthur disliked Gawain very much, and even treated him with hostility. So in his heart, Arthur also hoped that this guy would disappear quickly. King Uther frowned and asked, "Why do you say that?" Then Morgana told the whole story of Gawain's duel. Gwen is a citizen of Camelot. When she was hurt, Knight Gawain stood up with a noble spirit of chivalry to stop the atrocities. If such a person was punished, how would others view our Camelot? It must be said that what Morgana said made a lot of sense. It also grasped King Uther's weakness. He was very face-conscious. Others dueled with others to help the people of Camelot, and you, as the king of Camelot, actually punished them. This is really outrageous. Those who don't know would think that King Uther was afraid of the noble who molested women. King Uther thought for a while, looked at Kai, and asked for his opinion. Kai didn't feel anything special, it was just a small matter. But he felt that what Morgana said was not wrong, so he agreed with Morgana's opinion. "I think Morgana is right. No matter what, Gawain's original intention was to protect the people of Camelot." King Uther nodded, and was about to let the matter go, but he suddenly saw Arthur thinking something. King Uther thought Arthur had some opinion, so he asked, "Arthur, What do you think? Arthur was startled by King Uther's sudden question. I think, while Arthur was speaking, Gunnyong stared at Arthur. She didn't want Arthur to say anything that would disappoint her. Feeling Gunnyong's eyes, Arthur had a bitter taste in his mouth. Even if he refused to admit it, he knew that he was jealous. Fortunately, Arthur was also a principled man, and he didn't choose to lie because of his discomfort. Morgana is right. Chapter 83 in the hotel. In this way, Gawain was sent out of the palace in a daze. After leaving the palace, Gawain still couldn't figure out why he was let off so easily. Before coming to Camelot, he had heard of King Uther's reputation. This was an absolutely iron-fisted king. No one could violate his decrees under his rule. So Gawain didn't plan to cause trouble at first. He came to gain knowledge, not to mess up the place. It was not worth it to provoke a ruthless person like King Uther. But when it happened, Gawain couldn't help it. Anyway, he thought that the worst thing about this matter was that he would be disqualified from the competition, and there were no serious consequences at all. As for the future, he didn't care about these things. Gawain returned to the hotel, sorted out his thoughts, and finally made this matter clear. This was the first time he felt that not all nobles were bad. At least the Sir Kay and Princess Morgana he met were good people. By the way, there was also Prince Arthur, although he was a little confused why Prince Arthur spoke for him, but his eyes were not friendly when he looked at him. While Gawain was daydreaming in his hotel room, his door was knocked. Gawain opened the door and saw the rolling girl standing in front of his door with a pretty boy. Gawain was really impressed by the rolling girl. In fact, before helping the rolling girl, Gawain had seen the rolling girl once, just the day before. He had nothing to do at the time, so he planned to walk around the streets of Camelot to see if he could have some fun. When he was staring at girls everywhere on the street, he met the rolling girl. At that time, Gawain felt that the rolling girl was extraordinary. I'm not bragging, Gawain has always been very confident in his looks. As a result, he went to flirt with her, but the rolling girl ignored him at all. So he became interested, and he threw all kinds of earthy love words from the BC era, and by the way, he used his charm to find a little girl selling flowers to get a flower and gave it to the rolling girl. As a result, although the rolling girl was shaking with flowers, she still resisted Gawain's offensive. So cute, so unpretentious. Well, the domineering CEO falls in love with me. Really, this is the routine in the series, and Gunnyong, Arthur, and Lancelot all use this domineering CEO routine. I even suspect that this series was made by Gunnyong to satisfy her hobby of flirting with handsome guys, so Gawain became interested in Gunnyong, and then the hero saved the beauty, and then the beauty saved the hero. In short, after this, Gawain was less of a playful person towards Gunnyong, and was somewhat moved. Gunnyong's cheeks were hot, because Gawain was much more passionate than that idiot Arthur. He never concealed his thoughts from the beginning, and his eyes were always so aggressive, which made Gunnyong, who was still at the elementary school student passing notes level, a little at a loss. Seeing the ambiguity between the two, Merlin was really uncomfortable on the side. Eating dog food was one aspect, and being anxious was another. This is not to say that Merlin had any intentions towards Gunnyong, although when they just met, they did have a good impression of each other. This was reflected in the first season. Anyway, the girl would flirt with all the handsome guys in this show, but as time went on, the two of them didn't feel that they were in love. Mainly because Merlin had fallen in love with Morgana. Merlin's affection for Morgana was also reflected in the first season. I don't know why. The love line of the show Merlin was still centered around Merlin in the first few episodes of the first season, but suddenly it all belonged to the girl in the end. It's really strange. In short, although Merlin didn't become a lover with the girl, he became a good friend with her by accident. In addition, Arthur and Merlin are also good friends, so Merlin knows the little tricks between the two. Merlin is still worried about Arthur. What should I do now? The girl seems to be falling in love with someone else. Merlin immediately thought that although Arthur and the girl's feelings have warmed up, they are still more than friends, but not lovers. It can't be said that the girl has fallen in love with someone else. Merlin compared Gawain and Arthur again. It was not unfair for Arthur to lose this time. Gawain was so proactive. He was passionate and flirtatious whenever he met a rolling girl. Merlin, a man, felt goosebumps all over the floor when he heard it. But what about Arthur? He thought about it, but he just didn't say it. In this comparison, Gawain has a huge advantage. Thinking of this, Merlin couldn't help but start to worry about his good friend. But Merlin didn't think about the gap between Arthur and the rolling girl. Merlin and Arthur are good friends, but he is not familiar with Gawain. They just met today, so Merlin naturally favors Arthur. He felt that he should fulfill his friend's obligations and persuade Arthur, otherwise his sweetheart would really run away with someone else. "Why are you here?" After a lot of flirting, Gawain finally remembered to ask the rolling girl what he was doing here. "This is for you." The rolling girl was still in a turmoil at this time. How could she remember what she wanted to say? She just gave the bag in her hand to Gawain and ran away. Gawain held the bag and looked at the faraway rolling mother, then looked at Merlin, who was standing there in a daze with a sad face. He was confused for a moment. Did his love offensive fail again? No way. After a long while, Gawain finally calmed down. When he looked up, he found Merlin still standing at the door in a daze. "Who are you? What are you doing?" Merlin came to his senses. He just wanted to explain that he was sent by Arthur to help Gawain. Although Arthur was unhappy with Gawain's attentiveness to rolling mother, he was still very satisfied with Gawain's integrity. In addition, Gawain saved rolling mother anyway, so when he saw that Gawain didn't even have a servant, he thought of asking Merlin to help him. It was also a way to thank Gawain. It just so happened that Merlin was really idle these days and was almost sick. He lived a leisurely life all day, which stimulated Arthur, who was tired like a dog every day. In the spirit of revolutionary friendship that if I don't have a good life, you can't be idle, Merlin was sent here. Merlin was just about to explain. But before he could say anything, Gawain pointed to the door and said 2 words, "Get lost." Although Merlin was a servant, he had a special status. In addition, he was arrogant and could not stand Gawain's rough treatment, so he turned around and left. He didn't want to serve yet. When Merlin ran out of Gawain's room angrily, he suddenly bumped into someone at the corner of the hotel. Ouch! 2 with 2 screams. The weak chicken Merlin was knocked to the ground, but the person who was knocked was fine. Merlin got up and apologized immediately. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, this lady." When Merlin bumped into that person, his hands touched a soft thing, and the person who was knocked had a good smell, so Merlin subconsciously thought he bumped into a lady. But when he raised his head, he couldn't say it, because although the person opposite him was extremely handsome, judging from his clothes and appearance, he was a man. The person who was hit didn't make things difficult for Merlin. He just said it was okay and left. Merlin looked at the person who left in a hurry, then looked at his own hands. He suspected that the touch he had just felt was an illusion. Chapter 84, Which Morgause. On the other side, the man who was hit by Merlin returned to his guest room as quickly as possible. If there were someone in the room now, they would see the following scene. The handsome young knight locked the door and took off a crystal pendant on his chest. Then the young knight's face began to undergo some subtle changes. The lines that were originally masculine began to soften, the Adam's apple gradually faded, and the eyelashes and eyes gradually became feminine. Finally, he changed from a handsome young man to a blonde beauty. After recovering her original appearance, the beautiful woman dressed as a woman gently rubbed her chest that had just been hit by Merlin, and her face was uncertain. Of course, she was not savoring the touch just now, nor was she like many melodramas because Merlin touched her vital parts and she would not marry Merlin. She was now considering another thing, that is, whether to kill Merlin. Her identity was top secret. Once discovered, all her and Niwiti's plans would be exposed. After thinking for a long time, she finally did not put her murderous intention into action. Because now is the critical moment of the plan, any possible mistake may expose her, and the risk of killing Merlin is too great. Yes, this Merlin just escaped. After making the decision, the woman took out a crystal from her package. After a not too complex ceremony, a picture suddenly appeared in the crystal that was originally ordinary. And the picture was the witch Niwiti who had met Kai and the others not long ago. Morgause. You finally contacted me, Niwiti said anxiously after the picture appeared. The woman named Morgause responded to Niwiti's inquiry very respectfully. I'm sorry to worry you. Camelot City is now full of knights, so it's a bit difficult to contact Teolin's people, but fortunately, I have contacted them just now. How is the situation? Niwiti heard that Morgause had contacted Teolin's people, and she was immediately attracted. Not so good. They seem to have other ideas. They have been perfunctory about the progress of the task. I can see that they are not telling me the truth. Morgause was very dissatisfied with the hypocrisy of Torn and his team. In Morgaw's view, this was a shameful betrayal. Then according to your judgment, what is their progress? But Niwai seemed to be not interested in how Torn and his team were doing. Instead, she was very concerned about the progress of the task. Although he was surprised why Niwai didn't care about Torn and his team's betrayal, Morgaw still honestly told Niwai his judgment. I found one of Torn's men and controlled him with magic. He told me that Torn and his team were almost close to the tomb. However, due to the sudden decrease in King Uther's enthusiasm for the tomb, the number of manpower has been reduced a lot, and the excavation progress has also been affected. According to the current progress, it will take at least 10 days to dig the tomb. Is that so? 10 days. Niwai did not comment on this progress. Instead, she pondered and didn't know what she was thinking about. After more than 10 seconds, Niwai said to Morgaw, "That's good. Now that you have mastered the progress, you should leave Camelot as soon as possible. It's not safe there now." "What? Teacher, we don't care about Torn and the others? They are almost successful. If I leave now, the things in the tomb will most likely be taken by Torn. Please believe me. I am sure I can control them." Morgaw obviously didn't want the things in the tomb to fall into the hands of Torn and his group, because that was their most important support against King Uther and Camelot. She didn't want people like Torn to master these things. Seeing Morgaw so excited, Niwai unconsciously smiled. "It doesn't matter to us who has the things in the tomb. We just need someone to open the tomb." After Morgaw finished speaking, Niwai said slowly. "Teacher," Niwai's words made Morgaw completely incomprehensible. "That was the tomb of the most powerful wizard in history, Corelius Segan. It must contain countless treasures and many unknown magical items. These things were of great use to those who were committed to overthrowing King Uther and seeking revenge. Morgaw, remember your identity. You are the descendant of the noble triphase goddess. You are a noble witch, not an ordinary person. Don't be confused by those shallow things." Niwai's words sounded very profound and pretentious. But in fact, the things in the tomb could not be summarized by just one word: shallow. Niwai is very strong. In terms of her spellcasting ability, she is one of the best in the world. But compared with Corelius Segan, Niwai is not even worthy of carrying his shoes. Corelius Segan once ruled the world, and even the king could only tremble in fear in front of him. Even the magnificent and huge city of Camelot was built under his spell. The wealth he accumulated is more than the treasuries of all kingdoms today. In front of so much wealth, let alone Morgaw is just a witch. Even if she is a goddess, she has to kneel. As if seeing Morgaw's incomprehension, Niwai said to Morgaw in a weird tone, "The truly precious things in this mausoleum have never been those burial objects, but..." The next words Niwai spoke in an ancient lost language. Only Morgaw, the orthodox successor of the old church high priest, can speak this language. Niwai is also the high priest of the old church. Gaius mentioned this in the episode of Seeking the Water Beast. As Niwai narrated, Morgaw's face changed from confusion to astonishment, and then from astonishment to ecstasy. "Now you understand why I don't care about those riches." "I understand." Morgaw was very excited now, and even a little eager to try. Her long-cherished wish was finally coming true. "Since you understand, come back now. We can't be exposed until the tomb is opened." Niwai asked Morgaw to evacuate Camelot again. But this time Morgaw still refused. "No, teacher, I think I still need to stay here." "Why?" Niwai immediately realized what Morgaw was going to do as soon as she said this. "Are you still going to carry out that plan?" Morgaw nodded with a firm expression. This plan was formulated long before Morgaw came to Camelot, but it had never had a chance to unfold. "I think that my plan will not only not affect our plan, but can also serve as a cover at a critical moment, so I think I need to stay." "No. Kai is in Camelot now. He will not let your plan succeed. It's too dangerous." Niwai was originally very afraid of Camelot. The secrets of the city are much more than expected, and more importantly, Kai is still here. Niwai is also very afraid of Kai. This man has always given Niwai a very dangerous feeling. Even though he has no hostility towards Niwai from beginning to end, this feeling has always lingered in Niwai's heart. She doesn't think that Morgaw's plan can be hidden from Kai. After all, apart from Gaius and King Uther, only Kai knows the most about what happened back then. When Morgaw heard Kai's name, his brows frowned. Kai is indeed a very difficult opponent, and Morgaw's is also very clear about this. But Morgaw's is unwilling to let her give up like this. Chapter 85 Conference Opening. In the end, Morgause stayed in Camelot, which was inevitable. After all, Morgause was a living person, and she didn't want to leave. What could Nivi do to her? Would she rush into Camelot and take her back? In fact, Nivi understood Morgause's idea, because if it really came down to it, Morgause's hatred for King Uther was much deeper than Nivi's hatred. Both her parents died at the hands of King Uther, and she saw her mother killed by King Uther with her own eyes. And her mother was King Uther's lover, Vivienne, the wife of Glos, Duke of Cornwall. Of course, Morgause was not King Uther's daughter, she was the daughter of Vivienne and her husband, Glos, Duke of Cornwall. Morgause was loved by everyone in her childhood. She was born noble and her parents loved each other. But all this changed after the failure of King Uther's rescue mission for Duke Glos of Cornwall. Her father had just died in battle, and King Uther brought people to the Duke of Cornwall's castle, killed her mother Vivienne, and took away her sister Morgana. Morgana was still young at that time and didn't know the truth, but Morgause knew the whole story. In her opinion, all this was King Uther's way of eliminating dissidents. He first killed her father, and then planned to kill her mother and herself in order to eradicate the root of the problem. If Gaius, who was beside King Uther at that time, had not been kind and secretly let her go, she would have suffered from King Uther's murderous hands. Morgause was even more fortunate that Morgana was still young at that time, and King Uther was afraid that his reputation would be damaged, otherwise Morgana would not have escaped the murderous hands. This time Morgause must stay in Camelot, and he also wants to see his sister. On December 15th, the originally rainy weather finally became clear. It seems that because of the official opening of the Knights' Conference, God gave face. Kai also relaxed for a rare time. With the opening of the Knights' Conference, those troublemaking knights were finally attracted by the Knights' Conference. They had no time to fight and make trouble, and Kai didn't have to go around like a firefighter to solve troubles. Today is the first day of the opening. As a member of the Camelot royal family, King Uther, Arthur, Morgana and Kai all need to attend the opening. So Kai can sit in his seat and watch the violent people fighting each other in the duel field today, instead of having to find ways to stop them from fighting like before. King Uther is very enthusiastic about knight duels. It can even be said that the two things that King Uther is most proud of in his life, in addition to completely getting rid of the rule of magic in Camelot, are that he held the Camelot Knights Conference to its current scale. Take this year's Knights Conference for example, there are more than 500 knights participating in the competition. Maybe just looking at this number doesn't seem to be a big deal, after all, 500 is not a lot. But if you add the word knight after the number, it will be different. For example, let's take Camelot as an example. As the richest and most prosperous city among the Celtic countries, the city only supports 150 knights. And the entire kingdom of Camelot, all the knights added up to less than 300. Because knights are very expensive. Even the most destitute wandering knight needs to be equipped with a war horse, a set of chainmail and a set of knight armor, several lances, a knight's sword, and a shield. This is the standard equipment for knights. If you don't have these, no one will believe you are a knight. And how much does it cost to equip these things? Here is an account. First of all, war horses. This is the island of Great Britain, which is not rich in horses, so the price of horses is very, very expensive. Let's take Camelot as an example. The price of a bullock on the market is only 3 gold coins, and a sheep is even less than a few silver coins. But what about a qualified war horse? At least 30 gold coins are needed. Remember, this is just a barely qualified war horse. The price of war horses with good bloodlines and good condition will only rise exponentially. And chainmail. In Gwyn's blacksmith shop, the cheapest set of chainmail also costs 10 gold coins, and knight plate armor is 10 to 20 times the price of chainmail. As for knight lances, swords, shields and other things, they are just small money in comparison. Calculated in this way, the standard equipment of a knight alone requires at least 200 gold coins. For example, the previous dissolute knight Gawain, although this kid looks poor and doesn't even have a squire, in fact, his own wealth exceeds that of most middle-class families in Camelot. This is just the most basic. The cost of nobles canonizing knights is even higher. First of all, you want the knight to be loyal to you, you must give land, and this land cannot be less, at least a village. Then there is the monthly salary of the knights, and this salary cannot be low. Let's put it this way. The monthly salary of a qualified soldier is at most 3 gold coins, and the salary of a knight must be at least 10 times this number. So even a rich kingdom like Camelot can only support less than 300 knights. King Uther has 150 knights in his hands, which is very powerful among the countries. And the Knights Conference can gather 500 knights to participate in the competition at one time, so you can imagine how great its influence is. You know, these knights came here to make a name for themselves, so most of these knights are young and inexperienced. Those knights with monarchs and fiefs rarely participate in this kind of competition. This basically catches the young generation of knights in one fell swoop. King Uther was very satisfied when he saw the scene of flags like a forest in the duel field. The opening speech was naturally given by King Uther. Throughout the ages, the more grand the scene is, the more grand the speech given by the leader is. To put it bluntly, it is all correct nonsense. The speaker was drowsy, at least Kai had no interest in listening. This was just like the summary meeting of the anti-pornography and anti-illegal publications of the previous police force, full of clichés, without any novelty. But those King Uther spoke very enthusiastically and did not feel bored at all. Perhaps all leaders are like this, so Kai always thought that he had no talent for leadership. In short, after a long speech, the knight duel finally began. And the first person to go on stage was naturally our Prince Arthur. Because it was the first preliminary round, the officials in charge of the process would not choose any strong players to fight against Prince Arthur. After all, as a prince, he must have the right face. It would be too embarrassing to fight an unknown knight for 300 rounds in the preliminary round. Chapter 86 Competition. The competition items of the Knights Conference are very simple. There are only 3. Lance competition, knight melee, and knight tournament. The lance competition has been mentioned before, so I won't repeat it here. The knight tournament is also very simple, which is a one-on-one duel between 2 knights. The most interesting one is the knight melee, and the rules of the knight melee are quite simple and crude. It is a group fight, with no limit on the number of people. You only need to randomly divide into 2 teams and use blunt weapons to collide and confront each other. The winner of the game is the last person standing on the field. However, in order to concentrate on participating in the finale of the lance competition, many knights will not participate in the melee. If you are injured and cannot participate in the subsequent lance competition, it will be a loss for the greater good. Unless someone wants to get the title of champion knight and the high winning prize of the melee. The knight melee may be the most lively competition among the 3 events, so it is also the most popular among the people, because in this competition, to win, you need not only strength, courage, wisdom, but also luck. That's right, it's luck. Even the strongest knight in the knight melee may not win, and many ordinary knights have the opportunity to win. In short, there are many unexpected factors, so it looks ups and downs, and people like this kind of scene. Therefore, the prize money for the knight melee is also the highest. This makes many knights who want to get rich but don't have the confidence to stand out on the other 2 competitions choose to participate in the knight melee. In addition to these knights, there is another type of knight who will participate in the melee, that is, those who are extremely confident in themselves and think they can become champion knights. The champion knight of the Knight Conference is a very special title. This title does not refer to the champion of any competition event, but only knights who win the championship of 3 competitions at the same time are eligible to obtain this title. This is why when Kai won the title of champion knight in one fell swoop, some people predicted that Kai would likely become the first knight of all countries in the future. Although it is difficult to win a competition, it is not uncommon for someone to win every year, but it is extremely rare to win 3 championships in a row. At least in so many World Knight Conferences held by King Uther, only Kai can really win the title of champion knight. After all, there are too many accidents that may happen in these 3 competitions. Once a link goes wrong, it is very likely that nothing will be gained. Not many people dared to do this before, but since Kai completed this feat, many rookies have begun to follow suit, wanting to copy Kai's feat and become famous overnight. Not to mention, there are really people who are just a little bit successful, such as Knight Perino, who was almost successful that year. Although Knight Perino is very low-key in the Knights, he was also a passionate man back then. He participated in the Knight Conference in the next generation after Kai. At that time, he had already won the championship of the Knight tournament, and only the 2 championships of the Lance competition and the Knight melee were left. Because the final of the Lance competition is the highlight. It was placed on the last day of the Knight Conference. The Knight melee was on the penultimate day of the Knight Conference. As a result, in the Knight melee, Although Perino won the championship, he was also injured. In the final on the last day, although he made it to the final victory, he was defeated because his body could not support it. This is also the person who is closest to the champion knight after Kai. In short, with these two role models, the number of young knights who want to win the title of champion knight increases year by year. There are not many in this session, and Arthur is also rushing for the title of champion this time. But privately, neither Kai nor King Uther has much expectation for this. Their psychological bottom line is that Arthur must win a competition. Accompanied by the cheers of the audience, Arthur's first game soon began. According to the tradition of the Knight Conference, the first and last games are lance competitions. Arthur sat on the horse, arranged his full body armor, and slapped his dragon emblem shield hard. After feeling that the shield was tied very tightly, he put on the helmet. Then he took a more than 4-meter long knight lance from Merlin. This kind of knight lance is made of cork, decorated with gorgeous patterns on it, and the tip is specially made into a spherical shape and wrapped with cloth. Once this kind of lance pierces the enemy, it will break immediately. Of course, this does not mean that this kind of lance has no lethality. On the contrary, every year there are knights who die from internal bleeding because of being pierced in the breastplate. Its low lethality is only relative to the lances used on the battlefield. The lances used in wars are all equipped with sharp metal cones on the top of the 2-meter-long pole. The hardwood body has a hand guard at the hand position and a counterweight wooden cone at the rear. At the same time, a gun stock hole is made on the saddle to absorb the impact of the stabbing during the charge. This weapon is specially designed to fight against heavy armored units. Once stabbed by this weapon, it is very normal for both the man and the horse to be pierced. Arthur held the gun handle behind the huge butt and began to adjust his breathing. He carefully observed his opponent through the gap in his helmet. As the gong of the game was struck, the two horses began to accelerate, and charge. Thrust the lance. Sprint. In the center of the arena, the two war horses passed each other at high speed. Bang! After a loud noise, Arthur's lance accurately avoided the opponent's shield and hit the opponent's breastplate first. The opponent almost flew off the horse, and then fell heavily to the ground, stirring up dust all over the sky. He rolled several times before stopping, leaving a deep groove on the ground. Arthur had already run to the end of the track at this time. He turned his horse's head and saw his opponent who was motionless on the ground. He immediately raised the lance in his hand and cheered for his victory. Arthur had reason to be happy. The lance competition looked simple. In fact, this competition was the most challenging for the comprehensive quality of the knights. The lance competition required the knights to have superb equestrian cooperation, stable hands and amazing accuracy. The most important thing was that they needed a strong psychological quality. After all, if you don't have a good mentality when charging face to face with the enemy, you may retreat and be timid at any time. Once there is a problem with your mentality, your movements may be deformed at any time, and the consequences will be very serious. You may be injured or killed at any time. Every lance competition is not only an all-round competition between knights, but also a contest with death, so any victory in the lance competition is worth cheering. The people of Camelot also gave their prince the warmest cheers. If it was a normal knight competition, the people of Camelot would probably want the other side to fight for 300 rounds so that they can enjoy it, but when it came to their own prince, the people of Camelot naturally hoped that Arthur could crush him all the way. When Arthur announced his victory, Gaius, who had been waiting on the side, immediately rushed into the field with several soldiers and began to treat the unlucky guy who was knocked down. Gaius struggled to open the knight's helmet to see if the knight was dead. If he was dead, there was no need to carry out the subsequent actions. Fortunately, the knight's luck was not too bad. Although his breastplate had been deformed, it still protected him well. He just fainted from the fall. His bones were not broken, and there was no sign of internal bleeding. He only needed to rest and observe for a while before he could go back. People in this era have good physiques. If it had happened to Kai in his previous life, not to mention the hit to the chest, even the fall from the horse would have been enough to cost him half his life. Chapter 87 Plan. The following matches were unremarkable, at least for Kai. With his strength, if he really had to take up his lance and mount his horse, these people would be eliminated in the first round. The lance competition requires the combination of hands and eyes. With Kai's attributes and measurements, almost no one can compare to him in this regard. So although he has been sitting on the stage, in fact, his thoughts have long flown away. Just when the royal family was sitting on the rostrum watching the game, there were also people watching them. Among the crowd of spectators, there were also a few people who did not focus on the field, but stared at King Uther and Arthur. If there were people from the knights here at this time, they would definitely recognize that one of them, a middle-aged man wearing tattered clothes and a broken hood, was the rebel leader Thorin who Camelot was desperately pursuing. Who would have thought that the most wanted criminal in Camelot would actually appear in Camelot openly, even under the nose of King Uther? Sir, we have already decided on the candidates. They are two knights from Senedd. Camelot and Senedd have never had a good relationship. There has been little communication between the two sides, so the two knights don't have many acquaintances in Camelot. One of Talon's men stood behind Talon, pretending to watch the game while reporting to Talon in a low voice. They are already under our control and can take action at any time. The problem now is how to disguise as them. Talon did not answer his men's questions immediately, but stared at the rostrum, where his enemy was. He swore that he would make him and his evil kingdom pay the price in this life. Kai, who was on the rostrum, also felt that someone was spying on this side, so he immediately turned his head to look for the peeper. Seeing Kai so alert, Talon immediately turned his head to look at the stadium, pretending that he was standing up to cheer for the game. Kai scanned the crowd and found that the peeping eyes disappeared again. Kai frowned and turned his head to the knight lying beside him to explain a few words. Kai didn't find it strange that someone was spying on him. With King Uther's powerful aura of ridicule, there must be too many people who want to kill him. Now there are too many people, and Kai doesn't have the ability to find those people, so he can only tell Knight Lion to pay more attention to prevent anyone from harming King Uther. What Kai didn't know was that the scene just now scared Talon enough. His original plan was to find two knights to kill, and then let his men impersonate their identities to see if there was a chance to get close to King Uther and assassinate him. But Kai's alertness just now made Talon realize that his previous plan was completely overthinking. With a powerful knight like Kai staying by King Uther's side, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to assassinate him. Just as Talon was cursing secretly, Talon suddenly thought of another target he could choose. That is Arthur. Have you found out clearly that Arthur really participated in the three events? Thinking of this, Talon immediately asked his men. That's right. Although this matter was deliberately concealed, our people still found out about it. King Uther planned to let his son copy the feat of Knight K, so he asked Arthur to secretly sign up for 3 competitions. King Uther deliberately concealed the fact that Arthur wanted to win the title of champion knight. This is also normal. If you brag about it first and fail to fulfill it in the end, it will be embarrassing. King Uther certainly couldn't let his son lose face in front of his subjects, so Arthur's plan to win the title of champion knight was kept secret. However, this kind of thing can't be completely hidden. Anyway, as long as it is not spread on a large scale, there will be no problem. Very good, he is our target. Take it. Talon took out a small bag and threw it to his men. Here are 2 shape-shifting crystals. This kind of crystal only needs to be stained with the blood of others to transform into the appearance of that person. Choose 2 good hands and turn them into the 2 Senedd knights. Let our people participate in the night melee. I want them to kill Uther's son during the night melee. Let this tyrant also taste the pain of losing his loved ones. Talon's idea is quite good. Killing Arthur in the melee is undoubtedly a very good way. There are at least dozens to hundreds of knights participating in the night melee. In such a messy scene, it is really not easy to make a move. The subordinate got the bag but did not open it. It is very risky to expose such a treasure in such an occasion. He quickly put away the bag, and then said to Talon with a little embarrassment, "Leader, there is another question. Speak. Knights use blunt weapons in the melee to kill Arthur. What's more, Prince Arthur himself is also very strong in martial arts. I'm afraid it won't be so easy for our people to succeed." It must be said that this subordinate has a very clear mind and asked the point at once. Knights can only use blunt weapons in a melee, and it is really difficult to kill a knight in full armor with blunt weapons. In addition, Arthur's own strength is also very strong, which makes this more difficult. Talon also reacted at this time. He took it for granted. However, Talon quickly thought of a person who should be able to help them solve this problem. I remember that Niwai's disciple, the woman named Morgause, is still in Camelot, right? Morgause followed Niwai's order and came to Camelot to contact Talon's people. Talon naturally knew this. Otherwise, his men would not dare to change their attitudes at will. These things can only be decided by Talon himself. The tomb of Sejin is already in front of Talon, and Talon's thoughts are naturally different. When he thinks of the endless wealth and terrifying power contained in the tomb, with these things, does Talon still need to cooperate with Nui? He thinks that as long as he gets these things, he can destroy Camelot, kill King Uther, and complete his revenge. So he decided to perfunctorily deal with Morgause, let Nui and others misjudge the progress of the excavation, and create opportunities for him to transport those treasures and magic items. But before that, it is not impossible to use the witches again, and Talon knows very well that if he wants to use those witches for other things, he should not even think about it. But if it is to deal with King Uther, I believe that those witches will agree happily even if they know that they are using them. Go find that woman. I know there is a kind of sword called the Starlin sword. This sword looks blunt and has no edge, but in fact it is as sharp as a blade. It can cut open the intestines with just a light stroke. It is extremely sharp. This kind of sword can only be made by magic. That witch must have a way. Go find her and tell her our plan directly. She will definitely help, yes. Chapter 88 Hot. As the conference progressed, more and more knights returned in defeat. The lucky ones only had minor injuries and could recover after 2 days of rest. The unlucky ones even died. The competition among knights was always so tragic. But people always lacked sympathy for these losers, and they only chased the winners. Once the contestants lost, they would be forgotten immediately, no matter how optimistic they were before. Once they lost, there would be more popular contestants to replace them. It was also because of this tragedy that some rookies who originally had romantic ideas began to retreat. Before their debut, these rookies always thought that the world was like a legend. They thought they were the protagonists of the story, they could win the victory and be worshipped by everyone. But the reality is always cruel. When they really mounted their horses for the first time and faced those aggressive opponents, they realized that there were not so many protagonists in this world. So some people began to withdraw from the competition. Among them, 2 knights from Senedd withdrew from the competition without even participating in a game. However, this did not attract much attention, except that the people of Camelot gloated and cursed Senedd as a coward. Now all people's attention is attracted by the winner. Among these winners, 2 people are the most outstanding and are sought after by everyone. One of them is naturally the much anticipated Arthur. As the Crown Prince of Camelot, Arthur's identity is destined to make him different. In other countries, the Crown Prince rarely goes down to duel with other knights. This is not only a matter of identity, but also because as a Crown Prince, he must maintain his sense of superiority. If a Crown Prince of a country easily loses to others in the game, it will undermine the majesty of the Crown Prince. Therefore, Arthur's registration made many knights excited. The reputation brought by defeating a Crown Prince is definitely not small. As long as they are not Camelot knights, they are very willing to use Prince Arthur to decorate their own honor. This also leads to the automatic max morale of the knights on the opposite side who fight against Arthur. Arthur didn't feel it was unfair, on the contrary, he just felt excited. Since Kai came back from his world tour, he has been training him most of the time, and now is the time to verify the results of his training. Arthur was particularly excited. Another star who attracted attention was a little unexpected. His name was Gawain. This name was almost unknown before this night's conference, but as the conference progressed, this name became more and more famous. Like Arthur, he participated in all 3 events of the conference, but unlike Arthur, his participation in the 3 events was public. From the beginning, everyone knew that he participated in the 3 events. This was not uncommon in this night's conference. What was really unusual was that he was very likely to win the triathlon after Kai. The night melee was on the penultimate day of the conference, so it was difficult to evaluate. But in the other 2 events, the lance competition and the knight's duel, he made great progress all the way. His advantage in each game was quite obvious, and he could even be said to be at ease. In addition, his uninhibited style was very popular with the audience, especially the ladies. On the 10th day of the conference, every time Gawain competed, the ladies of Camelot seemed particularly crazy, and they even squeezed out the men. When Gawain competed, looking around, the first few rows of the audience were all dressed up ladies screaming and cheering for Gawain. This made Gawain the most jealous object of other knights after Arthur. For Arthur, other knights just wanted to use Arthur to become famous, but for Gawain, it was naked jealousy. Who made him have so many female fans? Having female fans is a public enemy. It's not the knights' fault. They are all violent people. Appearance is secondary. What they want is to be strong and fierce. How can you be deterrent if you are not strong and fierce? So generally speaking, the fans of knight competitions are mostly men, and most women are not interested in such bloody competitions. In the past, everyone didn't have many female fans, and no one said anything about anyone, so naturally there was nothing to be jealous of. Even in the knight conference that Kai participated in, there were not so many women crazy about supporting Kai. It's not that Kai is not handsome, but Gawain is not only handsome, but also uninhibited. As the saying goes, men are not bad, women are not handsome. Kai always behaves calmly and seriously, and this kind of personality is not liked by women. But Gawain is different. He almost satisfies all women's fantasies about men. He is handsome, tall and strong, humorous, romantic and uninhibited. Even his biggest shortcoming, poverty, is no longer a problem because he became famous in the Knights Conference. As his fame grew, it can be imagined that his future is no longer a problem. There are many noble lords willing to pay a high price to make Gawain their vassal. Gawain has now become the benchmark of a perfect partner. Now Camelot even has a nickname for Gawain, Prince Charming. On the one hand, this is because Gawain's warhorse is wide, and on the other hand, it is also praising Gawain for being a handsome, rich and capable man that women need in their dreams. So Gawain became the public enemy of other knights. In a more vulgar way, it is that he is almost done pretending by himself, so how can others get along? Such people must be beaten to death. What no one expected was that Arthur was also included. Arthur didn't care about other women, he wasn't that superficial. But when the rolling girl got involved, things became different. Although the rolling girl wasn't as crazy as other women, she still watched every game of Gawain's. And Gawain also gave the rolling girl face. After winning each game, he would send flowers to the rolling girl to express his love. This made the rolling girl be called a bitch by many women. If it weren't for Morgana protecting the rolling girl, she would have been torn apart by those confused women as a mistress. In short, this scene deeply stimulated Arthur. Except for telling Merlin about his distress, he didn't dare to let anyone know his little tricks in his heart. Even Morgana, who always liked to go along with him, could know. Don't think Morgana and the rolling girl are as good as one person, but once Morgana knew that there was a relationship between the rolling girl and Arthur, believe it or not, the rolling girl would be driven away the next day. I treat you as a sister, but you are flirting with my brother? Don't say Morgana and Gunny are fake sisters. The difference between Arthur and Gunny is too big. So big that it is impossible for them to get together. If Arthur really gets together with Gunny, the reputation of the entire Camelot royal family among the Celtic countries will be ruined and become the laughingstock of everyone. At that time, the ancestors of the Pendragon family will probably jump out of their graves and strangle Arthur, the unfilial descendant, and King Uther will not need others to take revenge on him. He will be angry to death. In this way, if Morgana only drives Gunny away, that is the deep sisterly love. In short, Arthur has a ball of fire in his heart, but he doesn't know who to vent it. So Gawain, the fool, has become the best channel to vent. What Arthur is looking forward to most now is waiting for Gawain to meet him. Before that, he cares more about Gawain's victory or defeat than anyone else. Gawain can only lose to him, Arthur. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, Morgause is going with the flow. This is what you want. Morgause has not been to the duel field in recent days. He has been concentrating on making 2 starlin swords. Morgana went to the duel field every day before, not because she wanted to watch the poor duels of the knights. Morgause himself is extraordinary. There is a saying that poor children grow up early. Morgause's experience is much more miserable than those poor children. The destruction of her family 20 years ago made Morgause grow up quickly. In order to revenge, she not only learned magic from Niwai, but also made up for the shortcomings of ordinary wizards, weak physical fitness. She used her talent to make up for it. She squeezed herself desperately to make herself a person without weaknesses. In terms of skills, Morgause is very confident. In her opinion, the knights on the field are not worth mentioning except Arthur and Gawain. The reason why she went to see those poor performances was entirely to see her sister. As a princess, Morgana had to accompany King Uther to watch the game when Arthur participated in the war. After all, the royal family couldn't let King Uther, an old man, stand there. Kai was originally a good choice, but now that the competition has been going on, only elite knights can stay on the field, and these elites are qualified for Kai to serve as an arbitrator. Therefore, Kai must be the arbitrator of the knight competition, and Morgana can only sit on the rostrum with King Uther. King Uther watched all the games without missing a single one. The night conference was simply heaven for King Uther, and he wished he could stay here 24 hours a day. In this way, Morgana could only watch the battle with King Uther reluctantly. In fact, she had no interest in this bloody competition. Every time she saw someone injured or even dead, she felt distressed. But due to etiquette, she could only accompany her. Morgause went to the duel field every day just to see if Morgana was doing well. At least from now on, Morgana is indeed doing very well. Although in Morgause's opinion, King Uther is a hypocritical tyrant, he treats Morgana very well anyway. Just look at Morgana's clothes, jewelry and princess crown, they are not ordinary items, and each one is extremely expensive. From this aspect, it can be seen that King Uther really treated Morgana as a real princess. What made Morgause even more gratified was that Morgana had an exceptionally good partner. Kai? Morgause had heard this name countless times. He was upright, brave, handsome, and outstanding in strength, and was known as the first knight of all countries. Before Gawain appeared, Kai was the most popular knight, and for this reason, many women envied Morgana. Morgause certainly hoped that his sister could get the best. But this was also Morgause's biggest distress. If he wanted to kill King Uther, he had to face Kai. As King Uther's adopted son, Kai lived up to his reputation for loyalty. The story of Kai saving Arthur has now spread, although everyone is praising Kai's loyalty. But I don't know how many people secretly think that Kai is a big fool. Obviously, as long as Arthur died, he would most likely become the heir to the king, but Kai went through so much trouble to save Arthur. Morgause thought so too. She even felt that if things really developed, then she might not need to work hard for revenge. Because this is definitely the best revenge for King Uther. No matter how cruel and hypocritical King Uther is. He worked hard, and the throne still fell into the hands of her sister and brother-in-law. Unfortunately, Kai chose loyalty. This made Morgause angry, but she had to face Kai. She once thought about telling Morgana the truth of the year, and then using Morgana to pull Kai to their side. But after a calm analysis, Morgause gave up this idea. Because she was not sure what Kai would choose after learning the truth. After all, Kai himself and King Uther not only had no hatred, but on the contrary, he was raised by King Uther since childhood, and his affection was deeper than that of his own son. Once things did not develop as she expected, then Kai and Morgana's marriage would encounter big problems. Seeing the happiness of her sister every time she communicated with Kai, Morgause was unwilling to destroy their relationship. In this world, Morgause only had Morgana as a relative, and she was unwilling to hurt her. It was not until Torrens people came to her that Morgause's mind became active again. Once the Torrens killed Arthur, wouldn't Kay be able to inherit the throne? More importantly, this was not her doing. Because in the prophecy of fate, Arthur could not be killed by these wizards and witches, but it did not say that he could not be killed by the rebels. So in Morgause's opinion, this plan had a high success rate. What's more, even if it failed, Morgause would not suffer any loss. At most, he could just continue with the previous plan. So Morgause interrupted his trip to see his sister and agreed to Torrens' request. The two starlin swords looked no different from the blunt swords used by ordinary knights in melee. Although they were shining coldly, they were not actually sharpened. But as long as you pick up the long sword and put it in your hand, you can immediately feel the sharpness of the long sword. One of the rebels picked up the long sword and gently scratched the corner of the table, and the corner of the table was immediately cut off silently. A group of people looked at the cut corner of the table and gasped. "I've given you the things. Now it's up to you. Don't let me down." Morgause looked down on these rabble. After saying this, he disappeared without a trace in the wind. This made the rebels look at each other in bewilderment, and their fear only increased. These witches themselves have all kinds of strange abilities, and they come and go without a trace, which is too weird. But immediately, these people thought that they were largely on one side. So one by one they were excited again. These rebels were Avengers born because of King Uther's iron-fisted rule over the years. These people have a blood feud with King Uther. For them, As long as they can make King Uther, the tyrant, pay the price, they will not hesitate even if they make a deal with the devil, not to mention these witches. Soon the two swords were delivered to the two Senate knights. What they have to do now is to wait quietly for the arrival of the knights' melee, and then insert the two swords into Arthur's heart in front of King Uther. Happy times always pass very quickly, especially for the people of Camelot. The total competition period is 15 days, and now 13 days have passed. The carnival will soon end. But the closer it gets to the end, the more exciting the competition becomes. In these 13 days, more than 80% of the knights have been eliminated, and the remaining ones are the elite among the elites. So now, no matter Arthur or Gawain, every game is no longer as easy as before. Of course, this is not the most regrettable thing. The real regret is that Arthur and Gawain met in advance. The semifinals of the knights competition, the exciting duel that everyone is looking forward to, actually started in advance. For this result, the people are both looking forward to and regretful. After all, this kind of dragon-tiger fight is more dramatic at the end. Compared with others, Arthur also feels regretful. He thinks it would be more interesting and meaningful to defeat Gawain in the final, the position closest to the victory. But the competition system is like this, and he can't control it. And this can't be blamed on the officials who divided the groups. Before the knights' meeting, who knew which Gawain was? Chapter 90, Fight. In the duel, Kai looked at the atmosphere between the two people in front of him and felt as if he had missed something. How could these two people who had nothing to do with each other see each other as if they were seeing the murderer of their father? Was it King Uther's fault again? Thinking of this, Kai turned his head and looked at King Uther on the rostrum. Then he overturned this guess. King Uther obviously didn't know Gawain, and Gawain behaved very normally when he saw King Uther. This time it shouldn't be King Uther's fault. Is it that Arthur and Gawain have a personal grudge? It shouldn't be. Arthur has been so honest recently that he rarely even goes out of the palace. How could he make an enemy of Gawain? So what are these two people for? From the beginning, everyone thought that this game was a collision between Mars and the Earth, which was extremely eye-catching. But the development of things was still a little unexpected. When Arthur and Gawain walked onto the field, the two were already on edge before the fight started. The fiery atmosphere ignited the passion of the audience without the need for words. The deafening cheers and whistles almost shook the entire venue. People don't care what these two people are fighting for. They just want to see a wonderful duel. Other things don't matter at all. Only Merlin and Gunnyong in the audience look very worried. Others don't know. How can they not know? These two are rivals in love. Among them, Gunnyong was the most worried. She would feel distressed if either of them was injured. She even wanted to rush into the arena to stop the duel at all costs. But she didn't dare. Because she knew that if she did so, Kai would probably cut off her head with a sword before she could say anything. At this moment of public attention, if someone jumped out to make trouble, it would simply be against the entire kingdom. In order to maintain the majesty of the kingdom, Kai would never hesitate to kill people. This dilemma made Gunnyong dare not open her eyes and look at the duel field. The competition was about to begin. Before that, Kai called Arthur and Gawain over to give final instructions. Gentlemen, the fact that you have come this far is enough to prove your excellence, so I hope that after the competition, both of you can leave the field intact. This is what should be meant. Kai basically said this to both parties in the competition every time he was an arbitrator, but few people really listened to Kai's words. Once these reckless men are on the field, they are easily carried away and fight to the death. For the fairness of the game, Kai cannot intervene to stop the game unless there is a 1-point victory or defeat. So there are really many idiots who died in the knights competition. Kai doesn't want his brother to become one of those fools. So when he said this, Kai knocked Arthur's helmet hard to make him listen. At the same time, in order not to make his bias too obvious, Kai treated Gawain in the same way. But unexpectedly, Gawain, this restless guy, did not play according to common sense. Yes, you should listen to Sir Kay's advice. Hurry up and roll down with your big ass. I won't let you go just because you're a shitty prince. I'll beat you until you call me mom. Gawain was not a good boy to begin with, let alone when he met Arthur, his rival in love, so he naturally wouldn't hold back. Gawain has been attacking the girl these days, hoping to win her heart. But every time the girl is teased, she blushes and her heart beats wildly, but she won't let Gawain succeed. At first, Gawain thought it was because of his lack of charm, until he accidentally discovered that the girl and Arthur had a small quarrel, and the reason for their quarrel was because of him. Since then, Gawain understood that Arthur was his rival in love. In addition, Gawain himself had a prejudice against the nobility, so he immediately imagined some clichés of the second generation of rich people playing with feelings, the dandy boy abandoning his lover, the playboy breaking his heart, and so on. In short, Gawain always considered himself a flower protector, and he would never sit by and watch this flower of his mother being ruined by a powerful son like Arthur. So his hostility towards Arthur was about to break through the sky. Arthur, on his side, almost lost his temper when he heard Gawain's venomous tongue. Fortunately, Kai grabbed his shoulder and pressed him down. "I hope your sword and your mouth are sharp. After the game, I will pull out your tongue as a trophy, so that everyone can see that you are just a clown who shows off his tongue. Only this tongue of your body has some collection value." It was the first time Kai knew that his brother actually had such a side. But Kai soon stopped the two people from arguing. What kind of occasion was this? Two knights arguing like country hooligans. Isn't it embarrassing enough? Enough. Check your weapons and armor. After confirming, get ready to start, under Kai's suppression, Arthur and Gawain took a few steps back in indignation and began to organize their armor and weapons. But at this time Gawain started to play tricks again. When he was sorting out the armor, he deliberately showed the logo on the armor to Arthur. There was the logo of the blacksmith shop of Gunnyeong's family on it. This set of armor was given to Gawain by Gunnyeong. That day, after Gawain was declared innocent by King Uther and could continue to compete, Gunnyeong specially found a piece of armor from her own blacksmith shop and gave it to Gawain. Originally, it was to thank Gawain for his bravery, but now Gawain used it to stimulate Arthur. Gawain even took out a red ribbon and tied it on his arm. "This is a lucky charm made by Gwen for me," this guy deliberately said loudly. Arthur's face was full of blue veins when he saw this scene. Fortunately, he was wearing a helmet and Kai didn't see his expression, otherwise with Kai's IQ, he would really guess something. Arthur looked at Kai on the side, gritted his teeth and didn't say anything, but his breathing became heavier. He swore that he must let this bastard taste his power. As the two nodded to show that they were ready, Kai announced the start of the competition. Duong, the huge gong was struck, and the game officially began. Without any trial or hesitation, Arthur turned into a shadow and rushed towards Gawain at the beginning of the game. Dang, Gawain obviously underestimated Arthur's strength and suffered a little loss in the first confrontation. Although he blocked Arthur's long sword, his body retreated a few steps under Arthur's strength. Facing Gawain's flaw, Arthur had no intention of stopping. He held the sword in one hand and used his palm to hold the end of the hilt with the other hand. With both hands, he thrust a long sword straight into Gawain's chest and abdomen. Although Gawain lost the initiative, he was not slow to react and immediately put up his shield. Arthur's radical thrust was a move that Arthur figured out based on Kai's training. It was a bit like Bajiquin, at least the footwork and force logic were very similar, so you can imagine how powerful it was, not to mention that Arthur's weapon itself was cheating. That was the magic weapon Kai gave him, Curry Stick. It was so sharp that it pierced through the knight's armor with one strike. Thanks to Gawain's shield blocking in time, Arthur's sword pierced through Gawain's shield, but Gawain still took away a lot of the force, so it didn't pierce Gawain. Chapter 91, Battle. Gawain's reaction was also very fast. The moment the long sword pierced his shield, he immediately swung his shield outward, intending to use the shield to disarm Arthur's long sword. Unfortunately, he underestimated Arthur. Arthur had been used by Kai with this trick, and he was playing with ecstasy. He often pierced Kai's shield with one blow, but the next second, his weapon was disarmed, and then he was beaten black and blue. So when he saw that he could not hit Gawain, Arthur was very alert to retract his sword. Gawain just took his weapon aside and did not put away his long sword. Gawain was not discouraged. He quickly changed his moves. He directly swung his shield and hit Arthur. The knight's shield is not only used for defense. Generally speaking, the knight's shield is made of gold-wrapped wood. The inside is made of wood and the outside is wrapped with metal. This is done to reduce weight. Of course, some gifted knights will use full metal shields, but they are rare. Besides, the defense power of hardwood wrapped with metal is actually very strong, so there is no need to use a full metal shield. But even after using wood to reduce weight, a common iron-shaped small shield weighs about 15 pounds, and the edge will be wrapped with metal, which is almost as effective as a hammer when used to hit people. Using a shield to attack is also a compulsory course for knights. Arthur was not to be outdone, and he also raised his shield to meet it. Bang! The arms of both the men were a little numb after the impact of the shield. So both of them chose to step back and keep their distance. Arthur received the most traditional knight training and was very good at self-protection. When he kept his distance, he always held his shield upright. However, Gawain, because of his more eccentric personality, did not like to use a shield very much. He preferred to attack. After seeing that his shield had an extra hole and was a little deformed, he simply threw away his shield. He was more flexible, and throwing away the shield was more suitable for him to move. Gawain shook his slightly numb arm and looked at Arthur again. Arthur was also stunned when he saw Gawain throw away his shield. He rarely saw this situation. However, although he was surprised, Arthur still upheld the spirit of chivalry and threw away his shield. Gawain was surprised. He threw away the shield on his own initiative, not during the fight. Arthur didn't need to pay attention to this kind of fairness. What are you looking at? I won't take advantage of you. I will defeat you fairly. Although Arthur couldn't see Gawain's expression, he could still see his emotions from his body movements. So he explained. Arthur's move immediately made the whole audience cheer. The spirit of chivalry has penetrated the entire Celtic people. They like duels and respect anyone who abides by the spirit of chivalry. At this time, Gawain also slightly changed his opinion of Arthur. At least Arthur was not hypocritical even though he hated him. Humph. Take care of yourself. Don't cry and find excuses when you lose, but even so, Gawain was still unforgiving. Shut up, I will tell you who will cry soon. After a few words, the two rushed towards each other again. Although both of them agreed with each other a little, they became more and more fierce, as if the other was a mortal enemy. Thanks to their martial arts skills, they didn't get hurt even though they fought fiercely. This made the people around them very excited. They didn't have to see a bloody scene, they wanted a fierce battle. But generally speaking, fierce scenes are prone to bleeding. But it was not so easy for Gawain and Arthur. They were not only skilled in martial arts, but also had very fast reactions. They could resolve each other's attacks. In this way, the two fought for almost 10 minutes, but still couldn't do anything to each other. On the contrary, because of the continuous high-intensity confrontation, the two lost a lot of physical strength. They had been operating at the limit for the previous 10 minutes. They fought back and forth and were dizzy, and they couldn't stop for a moment. Although the audience around them exclaimed again and again, this kind of fighting style was very physically exhausting. By now, both of their eyes were covered with sweat. People who have never worn knight armor cannot understand that feeling. It is like an iron can, which is not breathable and heavy. Fortunately, it is winter now, it would be summer now. HMPH, the feeling of fighting in armor is really known only by those who have used it. In short, after a wave of extreme competition, both of them were a little exhausted, but relatively speaking, Gawain's situation was worse. He was good at swordsmanship and took the flexible route. Arthur took the orthodox knight route and the strength route. In addition, Kay had been training Arthur, resulting in Arthur's physique being much better than Gawain's. Gawain knew that if he continued like this, he would have no chance of winning. He was already feeling physically exhausted. So he planned to go all out. He seized an opportunity and suddenly drew his sword, blocking Arthur's long sword, then rotated his wrist and drew a circle with his sword. With his cleverness, the circle became smaller and smaller, and Gawain's long sword was getting closer and closer to Arthur's hilt. Arthur immediately realized that something was wrong, but it was too late. Gawain's wrist was raised, and the tip of the sword hit Arthur's wrist. Arthur could only decisively give up the long sword and let Gawain pick up his sword, otherwise the long sword would very likely break his wrist. At this time, Kay's training of Arthur took effect. At the moment when the long sword was picked up, Arthur immediately decided to use fists and feet to decide the outcome. He slid and directly invaded the space in front of Gawain. Gawain didn't expect Arthur to advance instead of retreating, and underestimated, so his sword was a beat slower. When he wanted to attack Arthur with a sword again, Arthur had already invaded the middle door. Arthur held Gawain's wrist with one hand, twisted and pulled with his backhand, causing Gawain's long sword to slip out of his hand, and his body staggered. Then Arthur hit Gawain's head hard with a headbutt. Bang! Arthur didn't hold back at all, not even caring about himself. Not only did the collision cause sparks to fly everywhere, but also the helmets of the two men were severely deformed. Seeing this scene, the audience stood up unconsciously, not wanting to miss any details. Gawain was hit by this headbutt and saw stars. More importantly, as the passive party, he had no right to choose the part of the collision. Arthur hit his nose with his forehead. Even with the protection of the helmet, Gawain's nose bled and his mouth was full of blood. Gawain fell to the ground and tried to stand up in a daze. He didn't want to lose. Arthur, on the other side, was also a little shaky. After all, it was his own forehead that hit him, so it was impossible that he was not hurt at all, and he had never practiced the iron head skill. Arthur took off the deformed helmet with great effort and threw it aside, then picked up his long sword from the ground and placed it on the neck of Gawain, who was struggling and kneeling on the ground. Chapter 92, Hypocrisy. Gawain did not struggle anymore. It was already like this, why was he struggling? He simply lay on the ground gasping for breath. He was really tired. Seeing this, Kai announced Arthur's victory very quickly. The cheers were naturally enthusiastic, but Arthur was not in a good mood. It was not that defeating Gawain, his love rival, was not worth being happy about, but he saw that the girl actually disregarded the decency and rushed down from the audience to Gawain, asking about the well-being of the defeated general. This was winning the world but losing her. Is there anything more heartbreaking than this? He tried his best to defeat Gawain just for the girl, but in the end, it was Gawain, the defeated general, who was favored by the beauty, while he, the winner, could only watch silently. At this moment, Arthur wished that he was lying on the ground. Unfortunately, his pride did not allow him to fail. Thinking of this, Arthur silently retracted his gaze and raised his hands to welcome the cheers of his subjects. At this moment, Arthur felt an unprecedented loss, and even had the urge to give up. He knew that it was impossible for him and Gun Niong to be together, but the impulse of young people was always so irrational. Arthur had never thought about the future. In fact, children of this age rarely think about the future. But the scene just now made Arthur sober up a little from hormones and rebellion. Seeing Gun Niong holding Gawain, he suddenly felt that it might be a good thing for the two of them to be together. At least he didn't have to worry about Gun Niong being killed by his father. Thinking of this, Arthur felt an inexplicable pain in his heart, but he still endured the pain and made himself laugh. At that moment, he even felt that this was love. Arthur's inner activities were secretive and obscure, and others naturally didn't understand. They were just cheering for the prince's victory wholeheartedly. In everyone's mind, Gawain has always been Arthur's rival. It can even be said that in this competition, except Gawain, no one else can think of anyone who can create obstacles for Arthur. Now that Arthur has defeated Gawain, it basically means that Arthur's road to victory has been extremely smooth, and he has already taken a victory into his arms. No one is unhappy about this situation. Arthur is the crown prince of Camelot, and everyone is proud of him. King Uther also rarely showed a satisfied smile to his silly son. At this moment, he really felt that his son finally satisfied him. Gawain was not disappointed. He was a knight, and a knight would never be depressed because of failure. That was too unmanly. He lost to Arthur, but he lost with conviction. Others defeated him fairly and squarely, which was not shameful. What's more, he was favored by a beauty. Looking at the rolling mother gently helping him to remove his helmet and plug his bleeding nose, Gawain felt that he had lost this battle. Rolling mother was also worried and confused. She had been praying in the audience that both the men would not be injured. Suddenly, Gawain was seriously injured, which made rolling mother panic, so she ran to Gawain regardless of anything. This was a subconscious action, not that she really made up her mind to choose Gawain. When she helped Gawain clean up, she immediately felt bad. But when she turned her head to look at Arthur, she found that Arthur was walking around the field to thank the audience. And he didn't even look at her. Gun Niong suddenly felt wronged, sad and lonely. She had planned to congratulate Arthur, but, seeing Arthur getting farther and farther away from her, Gun Niong wanted to catch up. But when she saw King Uther and Morgana celebrating Arthur's victory, she stopped. Perhaps, this is the best. At this moment, Gun Niong seemed to have realized something, and seemed to have lost something. Arthur happily returned to the palace with his family. After a simple celebration, Arthur returned to his room. Tomorrow is the night melee, which is the highlight, so he must stay in good shape. Once he passes this level, the title of champion knight will beckon him. Arthur was still smiling before entering the room, but as soon as the door of the room was closed, Arthur's smile disappeared. He threw himself on the bed and buried his head in the quilt, so that people could not see his expression. Merlin followed Arthur back to the room. He looked at the depressed Arthur with a complicated expression, but he didn't know how to comfort his friend. Others may not know the depression in Arthur's heart, but Merlin saw it clearly. He was also in the duel field at that time. When Arthur won, Merlin was also very happy, but when he saw the rolling girl rushing towards Gawain, he knew that it was not good. Merlin knew all the things in between, so he could understand Arthur's current mood. Just like when Kai returned, Morgana immediately threw herself into Kai's arms, and he felt bad. He wanted to persuade Arthur to attack quickly and save the rolling girl. But he was not completely confused after all. This matter was too big. Once exposed, everything would be over. And Merlin felt that Arthur was still angry, and talking at this time would have no effect. So the room was quiet. After an unknown amount of time, the door of the room was suddenly knocked. Merlin looked at Arthur. He still looked like that and had no intention of getting up. Obviously, he didn't want to be disturbed, so Merlin could only quietly walk to the door and open it. Gwen. Arthur raised his head from the bed when he heard the voice, but he was stunned again. He didn't get up, but lay quietly on the bed, intending to listen to what they were talking about. The rolling mother didn't know why she suddenly felt guilty when facing Merlin, but she immediately forced herself to calm down. She pretended to ask casually, "Arthur, how is he?" Hearing this, Merlin was happy. He thought that the rolling mother had changed her mind. "Arthur, ahem." Suddenly Arthur coughed, meaning that Merlin should stop talking nonsense. Like all little boys, Arthur was very face-conscious. He didn't want the rolling mother to know his previous weakness. In fact, Arthur was too sensitive. His so-called weakness was only known to him from beginning to end. Merlin didn't know. Merlin just thought that he was stimulated and in a bad mood. Now Arthur didn't let him say it. What could he do? He fell asleep. Merlin still decided to follow his heart. Although he felt that Arthur's temper could not save the rolling mother, what could he do? Force Arthur to see the rolling mother? He didn't want to be beaten. Gunnyong felt disappointed. Although she didn't come here to see Arthur, she still wanted to see him. As for what to say after seeing him, she hadn't thought about it yet. But now Arthur obviously didn't want to see her, which made Gunnyong feel even more wronged and miserable. In short, these two low-rank players in love each imagined a series of love dramas in their minds, which made the two sides drift apart. Chapter 93 crashed. Gunnyong quickly suppressed her disappointment and pretended not to care. Most young boys and girls care about their reputation. Even if they know that they can resolve misunderstandings by explaining, they feel that doing so will hurt their self-esteem and refuse to say anything. It can only be said that they are still naive. When they grow up, they will know that reputation is nothing. It doesn't matter if he falls asleep. Gunnyong didn't want to make herself look humble, so she forcibly put aside her concern for Arthur and said to Merlin with a calm face, "I came here specifically to find you." Looking for me, Merlin pointed at his nose and said in surprise. He couldn't figure out what these two people were doing now. They were only separated by a door and they were still concerned about each other, but they just didn't want to say it. Merlin was just a bronze. How could he understand all this mess? His only gratitude was that he thought these two people were too hypocritical. "Well, I want you to treat Gawain. His nose is broken, and it looks terrible. He has a game tomorrow, so Gaius is very busy, so I can only come to you to ask for help." This time, Gunnyong really came to the palace for Gawain's matter. Of course, there is no need to mention those little tricks in private. Anyway, she pretended not to think about those things now. Merlin looked at Gunnyong, then turned his head to look at Arthur, who was still pretending to be dead in bed, and suddenly felt at a loss. He has always regarded Arthur as his best friend. Now he goes to treat Gawain. Isn't that equivalent to betrayal? The little boy has not experienced much, so a little thing can make him infinitely magnify it. Merlin swallowed his saliva and deliberately said loudly, "What? You want me to treat Gawain? Are you sure? I'm very busy now, and I have to take care of Arthur. I don't have time." He actually did this to remind Arthur, "Brother, you should react, otherwise these two people will get closer and closer." Arthur naturally heard it, and at this moment he really felt mixed emotions. Although he kept telling himself that it was best for Gawain to be with his wife, he still felt it was hard to describe. It was like when you came home from get off work and found your neighbor, Mr. Wang, talking about life and ideals with your wife in bed. Although it was complicated, Arthur still said it. What's the saying? A short pain is worse than a long one. Since you have decided to let go, don't be reluctant. Merlin looked at Arthur in shock. He thought Arthur must have said it in anger. But before he could persuade him, Arthur spoke more strongly. Go. Merlin followed Gawain out with an ugly look on his face. Gawain's face was not much better. She could hear the determination in Arthur's tone just now. Obviously, he wanted to cut off the little bond between them. Why, halfway through the journey, Merlin finally couldn't help but say what he wanted to say. Why do you treat Arthur like that? Why do you want to hurt him? You know he likes you, why do you still want to get entangled with that Gawain? Is that Gawain really that good? So good that you can ignore Arthur's feelings like this? Merlin was also frustrated. He and Gawain had only met once, but he had a very bad impression of Gawain. He didn't think that Guy was better than Arthur. But the rolling girl didn't care about Arthur's feelings at all. Not only did she watch every game of Gawain, but now she called herself out in front of Arthur in order to cure Gawain. No. The rolling girl immediately waved her hand and wanted to explain. When the words came to her lips, she didn't know how to explain. To say that she didn't have any feelings for Gawain? That was absolutely a lie. Not only Merlin wouldn't believe it, but she herself wouldn't believe it. But to say that she really gave up Arthur because of Gawain? That was hard to say. Merlin didn't care about this. When the rolling girl said no, Merlin immediately grabbed the rolling girl and planned to walk towards Arthur's room. If that's not the case, then you and I will go and explain it to Arthur. He will understand. The rolling girl was going to struggle at first, but for some reason, she gave up. Maybe she wanted to explain it to Arthur, but she couldn't let go of her face before. Now Merlin gave her a way out, didn't he? But Merlin took a few steps and suddenly stopped. The rolling girl was just thinking about something with her head down, and didn't notice that Merlin stopped, and ended up bumping into Merlin. What's wrong with you? The rolling girl raised her head and was about to ask Merlin what happened. When she looked up, she saw Sir Kay standing in front of them with a sullen face. Merlin was almost scared to death at this moment, and he couldn't imagine what they might face next. The rolling girl was similar. Although she had some feelings for Arthur, she was not completely blinded by emotions. She knew what would happen if Kay or King Uther knew about what happened between them. Kay was actually more shocked than the two of them at this moment. What the hell was going on? Kai could see that Arthur was a little absent-minded before, but in the situation at that time, Kai couldn't ask Arthur directly, so he decided to wait a while, and then he would go to Arthur privately to have a good chat to see if he had encountered anything. After Kai had dealt with the matter, he just walked over here and saw Merlin and Rolling Girl over there. He thought that since he met them, he would say hello. But as soon as he approached, he heard this gossip. Arthur and Rolling Girl are actually together. Arthur? And Rolling Girl? Together? How is it possible for these two people? Why? Kai's mind is now echoing with these questions. All along, Kai has never really connected the two people together. For example, if someone asked Kai to describe what kind of girl Rolling Girl is, Kai would definitely say, she is a gentle, strong, kind and good girl. If Kai must say more, Kai would say, she has a good temperament. Well, the master in the police force once told him that if you really don't know how to praise a girl, or if the girl really has nothing to praise, then praise her temperament. Anyway, this word is very versatile. Even if others hear your evaluation, they will not feel that you have offended them. You have been praised for your temperament, what else do you want? This is Kai's impression of Gunyuang. He does not hate this girl. The words he just praised her were all sincere. She is indeed a good girl. But the problem is, she looks. Arthur has had adolescent impulses before, such as the beautiful elf girl from Avalon last time. She was so beautiful. It can even be said responsibly that although the female elf had bad intentions, she was definitely not inferior to Morgana in appearance. That is the kind of woman that normal men yearn for. Whether she is good or not is secondary. The main thing is that she looks beautiful. Aren't men visual animals? Chapter 94 Cover-up. But soon, Kai threw these messy things aside. Although the appearance of the Rolling Girl was extremely ordinary in his opinion, and her mouth was even a little crooked, he couldn't help but think that Arthur might like this. In short, it didn't matter how the relationship between the Rolling Girl and Arthur happened. What Kai had to do now was to strangle this relationship completely. It just so happened that there seemed to be some misunderstanding between Arthur and the Rolling Girl. In this case, let this misunderstanding continue. Kai looked at the Rolling Girl and kept thinking about how to deal with this girl. Kill her? Kai couldn't do it. After all, Kai was a person who had received modern education. He didn't care much about prejudice. If it weren't for this special environment, Kai would not care about Arthur's love at all. Pretend not to know? That's even more impossible. Although Kai himself didn't care about prejudice, the problem was that this society cared. This is a feudal society. No matter how open-minded Kai was, he couldn't influence others. A prince married his servant, the daughter of a blacksmith? If other nobles knew about this, it would be strange if they didn't quarrel. The royal families of other countries would probably laugh their heads off. What's more, Kai really couldn't speak about this matter. Otherwise, it would be hard to say, "Oh, you, Sir Kai, married a princess, but let your brother, the crown prince of the kingdom, marry a servant? What are you thinking?" People who don't know would think you are deliberately disgusting Arthur. In short, the best solution to this matter is to let this relationship end. Thinking of this, Kai immediately put away his expression and said with a smile, Gawain is a good man, and you two are a good match. But since you are already together, you can't be a servant anymore, which will make Gawain laughed at by others. How about this? You don't have to go to Morgana's place. I will let Morgana arrange a decent job for you. Recently, go home and have a good rest for a few days, and take care of Gawain. By the way, although Kai didn't say anything about Arthur, the meaning between the lines was very obvious. He wanted to whitewash the matter, making it seem like it had never even existed. Kai had already said that the girl and Gawain were a couple. Naturally, the girl had nothing to do with Arthur. Kai even drove the girl out of the palace. Although the words sounded nice, in order to find her a more respectable job, the actual meaning was the same. Both Merlin and the girl could hear this. Kai even emphasized at the end that the girl should take care of Gawain, which made the meaning obvious. The girl opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but found that she was powerless to refute. What could she say? Oppose Kai's decision? Then what position and identity did she have to oppose it? Have you ever seen a maid who could resist the order of a member of the royal family? As for the matter between her and Arthur, she had no position to oppose it. She knew the difference between their identities, and she knew that if she dared to resist on this matter, Kai would definitely not be as easy to talk to as he is now. Merlin was a little anxious on the side. He wanted to say something, but when he saw Kai's eyes, he dared not say anything. Do you have anything else to do? Kai looked at the two children and suddenly felt like he was a bad guy. He was so idle that he broke up a couple. Shouldn't that be something that only old-fashioned people would do? He was a modern young man after all. He never thought that he would do such a thing one day. But for the sake of Arthur and his mother, Kai had to do it. Once King Uther found out about this, he would not be as gentle as Kai. He would just reassign a job for his mother and let her leave the palace. King Uther would only let his mother die directly and make Arthur completely give up. Facing Kai's question, Merlin and his mother didn't say anything. Since you have nothing to do, go home early. Gawain is still waiting for you. After that, he asked his mother to leave. His mother hesitated for a moment, but still left. She didn't know what to do, or she couldn't do anything. Merlin also hesitated for a moment and planned to leave with his mother. But Kai stopped him. Merlin, where are you going? Gawain is injured. Gwen asked me to help him, Merlin said a little guilty. Oh, then wait a minute, I have something to tell you. So Merlin was left behind, standing alone in front of Kai. Merlin looked uneasy. Kai spoke only after the rolling girl walked away. Merlin, you knew about this a long time ago, right? Merlin naturally knew it a long time ago. He even knew what Kai meant by asking this. He was blaming Merlin for not stopping this. But Merlin didn't think there was anything wrong with this. In Merlin's opinion, the rolling girl was a good girl. She deserved Arthur. And the two of them were truly in love. Kai saw Merlin's expression and roughly guessed what he was thinking, because if he changed his perspective, Kai might also think so. Everyone has his own responsibilities. You have, I have, and Arthur has too. Do you understand? No one can act recklessly. Merlin understood what Kai meant by this, but he didn't agree. He didn't think Arthur's responsibilities had anything to do with his emotional life. This has nothing to do with what happened between them. Why can't Arthur choose the girl he likes? Gwen is a good girl and she deserves Arthur. You should understand Arthur and encourage him instead of breaking them up. Encourage? Merlin, do you understand what responsibilities Arthur bears? If he wants to be king, then he must give up some things for the sake of the kingdom. Can you make your subjects accept that their queen is a maid? Can you make all the nobles and ministers accept that the queen they are loyal to is a commoner who is even lower than them? Can you make the royal families of other kingdoms accept a vulgar woman standing between them, Kai's words were very harsh, even he himself found them harsh, because they were completely contrary to the education he had received. But this is the reality. Because this era does not allow this kind of marriage, at least most people cannot accept this kind of combination. I didn't say that the relationship between Arthur and Gunny is wrong, but it is definitely inappropriate. Can you imagine what King Uther would do if he knew about this? It would only hurt both of them. You are their friend, and what you should do is to prevent them from getting hurt. Merlin opened his mouth. He wanted to refute, but reason told him that Kai was right. But he still didn't want to accept it. He just felt that Arthur couldn't even choose the person he truly loved. Wasn't that too sad? Can't you persuade him? King Uther listens to you the most. As long as you support Arthur, there will definitely be a chance. Kai glanced at Merlin, not knowing what to say to him. Is he really stupid or just pretending to be stupid? Enough. If you don't want Arthur to completely lose his inheritance, don't say such stupid things anymore. Also, I don't want them to have any contact anymore. This is for their own good. Do you understand? If King Uther was so easy to persuade, he wouldn't be King Uther. Besides, even if another king came, he would never agree to such a thing. This is simply making a joke of royal traditions and aristocratic rules. No king in his right mind would agree to this. Chapter 95, The Elegant Gawain. Merlin finally left the palace in a daze and came to the hotel where Gawain was. Gawain's injury was not as serious as imagined, and his nose was not broken. This was also thanks to the high quality of the armor of the Rolling Mother's family. Although his helmet was deformed by Arthur's headbutt, it saved Gawain's straight nose. But whether it was Merlin who came to help him with the treatment, or the Rolling Mother who was taking care of him, they all seemed to be worried and absent-minded. Even when applying the medicine, the Rolling Mother almost smeared the medicine on his mouth. What's wrong with you? Why do you look like you have lost your soul? Gawain was a straightforward person and couldn't help asking directly. The Rolling Mother and Merlin were stunned. Finally, the Rolling Mother recovered first. I'm sorry, I feel a little uncomfortable. I'll go back first. After that, she left without paying Gawain's request. Gawain was stunned. Where was the beauty who was supposed to accompany him? Why did she leave just like that? So he turned his head and looked at Merlin. What's going on? Gwen was bullied. Merlin didn't want to tell Gawain about this. He still believed that this was Gawain's fault. If Gawain hadn't intervened, Arthur and Gwen wouldn't have had any misunderstandings, and Sir Kay wouldn't have discovered this relationship because of the misunderstanding. So, it was all Gawain's fault. Merlin naturally didn't have a good face for the culprit. But Gawain was not a gentle man. He grabbed Merlin's collar and put the sword on Merlin's neck. Merlin was such a smart man, of course he knew how to choose, and he told everything very simply. However, due to personal opinions, the facts spoken by Merlin were always a little distorted. Anyway, in Gawain's ears, this was the case. Gwen was originally in love with Arthur, and the two were simply a perfect match, except for a vow of love. But Gawain's appearance caused a misunderstanding between the two. Originally, this matter could still be saved, but unfortunately, their feelings were known by Arthur's brother-in-law, Sir Kay. Sir Kay is a stern and serious man. He cannot accept the identity of the Rolling Girl, so he forced the couple to break up, drove the Rolling Girl out of the palace, and forbade Arthur to have any contact with the Rolling Girl. Although most of these descriptions are true. But Kay inexplicably became the villain in the story. Merlin actually knew that Kay was doing it for the good of both of them, but he still refused to accept it. It was wrong to prevent two people who truly loved each other from being together for the sake of those secular prejudices. Coincidentally, Gawain thought so too. He was originally unruly, full of prejudice and contempt for the nobles, and even more disdainful of those secular eyes. Others think that Arthur and the Rolling Girl's love is against secular common sense, but in Gawain's view, this is not a problem. As long as they love each other sincerely, everything else is not a problem. He likes the Rolling Girl, but he thinks that the Rolling Girl actually likes Arthur, but because of her appearance, not only did the two lovers who really love each other have misunderstandings, but also because of her own reasons, the matter was leaked, so that the two will never meet again. Gawain was not comfortable no matter how he thought about it. What's more, the thing that Gawain hates most in his life is bullying others by taking advantage of one's power. It just so happens that what Kai did before was bullying others by taking advantage of one's power in Gawain's eyes. So out of gratitude and guilt towards Gun Niong, Gawain decided to stand on Gun Niong's side. He wanted to help Gun Niong and Arthur renew their relationship, Gawain is a weirdo. What he likes to do most in his life is to stand on the side of the weak to fight against the strong. Now Gunnyeong and Arthur are the weak, and Kai has become the villain boss. If Kai were here, he would definitely be at a loss whether to laugh or cry. These young people are always so confused. They always think that they are right and others are old-fashioned. They despise authority, despise rules, and always want to break the status quo. But they don't know that those they despise and oppose are the real world. Maybe when they become like Kai one day, they will grow up. How are you going to help them? Are you going to rush to King Uther and Sir Kay and tell them that you can't stop Arthur and Noddy from being together? I tell you, the only outcome of your doing this is that you will be beheaded by the furious King Uther. Our Majesty has never been a good man. Merlin pointed out the most critical problem. As long as Kay and King Uther disagree, Arthur and Noddy will never have the possibility of being together. If these two are really irritated, they may really kill people. Even Merlin knew that Kay used Gawain as an excuse to drive Noddy out of the palace. In a sense, it was really to protect Noddy. At least Kay's actions didn't really hurt anyone, but if King Uther came to deal with this matter, what would happen to Arthur? Merlin couldn't think of it, but Noddy would definitely be in danger. Don't worry about it. There will always be a way. Gawain didn't have any way, but he didn't have no ideas at all. But the most urgent thing is to let Gwen have the opportunity to contact Arthur. Otherwise, if they can't meet, then everything will be in vain. Gawain, you say it's okay, but he likes to do things based on his momentary emotions. If he likes you, no matter who you are, he will help you, but if he doesn't like you, then you are a piece of shit. For example, Kay. Before, Gawain had a very good impression of Kay, thinking that he was an outlier among the nobles and a good man. On the contrary, he looked down on Arthur. But now, it's suddenly reversed. I really don't know how to describe this kind of person. Too cool. Before, he vowed not to give up until he couldn't catch up with the rolling girl, but now he wants to match the rolling girl in Arthur, so free and easy. What are you going to do? Sir Kay has already spoken. In the whole kingdom, no one except King Uther can change Sir Kay's order. Merlin was powerless to do anything about it. He was just a servant, and his status was similar to that of the rolling girl. Gawain thought for a moment and said, if I become a knight of Camelot, then if you follow me, can you see Arthur? Merlin was dumbfounded. This man's logic is really amazing. Aren't you afraid of pissing Arthur off to death? People who don't know would think you are trying to show off in front of Arthur. What's that look in your eyes? Is my idea bad? Gawain felt that Merlin looked at him as if he was mentally retarded. You are already with Gwen, and you let Arthur see Gwen? Who are you trying to piss off to death? Pa. I said it wrong. What I meant was, if Gwen is allowed to be close to Arthur under my guise, can she get close to Arthur? Gawain realized that he had said the wrong thing. Merlin thought about it and felt that it was still hanging. After all, Kai knew the truth, so it was naturally impossible for them to have more contact. But now it seems that there is no other way, and if it really doesn't work, it can only be said to be destined. So what are you going to do? I plan to become a knight of Camelot. But before that, I need to defeat Arthur and win the remaining 2 competitions. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96 Night's Melee. The next morning, the winter sun made people feel warm all over. There was not a single cloud in the sky and the wind was not strong. It was definitely a good day for outdoor activities. So almost the entire city of Camelot went out to the arena outside the city. This is the venue for the night melee. Because there were too many people watching, the night melee competitions were always held outside the city. In the arena, more than 100 fully armed knights were divided into 2 groups, one on the left and the other on the right. Even though there were crowds of people outside the arena and the noise was deafening, the arena remained silent. Since these knights dared to participate in the night melee, they were naturally very confident in their riding skills. Most of the knights controlled their horses very well, allowing them to maintain a basic queue in such a huge noise. These knights were all in full armor, and their weapons could only be unopened long swords and shields. In order to maintain the fairness of the melee, the knights did not have emblems representing their identities, and even the crowns were provided by the conference on their own initiative. The styles were similar, just to prevent someone from colluding and violating the fairness of the melee. So these more than 100 knights all look similar. Although they look a little monotonous, more than 100 heavy cavalrymen gathered together, and the momentum is also very magnificent. This is also one of the reasons why people like knight melees, at least the scene looks much bigger. With the order of King Uther, the trumpeter on the main stand blew the horn, and the low sound went straight to the sky. The next moment, the knights launched a charge. More than 100 heavy cavalrymen launched a charge together, and the momentum was definitely not what ordinary people could imagine. Those spectators sitting in the stands could even feel the tremors of the ground. As the knights accelerated, the deafening sound of horse hooves became more and more uniform, as if a big drum sounded in everyone's ears, and everyone's heart was engulfed by this unique frequency, beating along with the frequency of the horse's hooves. Accompanied by a huge roar, the two metal waves collided with each other without reservation. The knights collided in the center of the arena, and the first collision almost eliminated nearly 30% of the contestants. In the first collision, they were either knocked off their horses by the enemy or lost control of their horses and fell off. But no one cared about these people. People turned their attention to the knights fighting on horseback. After the first collision, the two rows of knights lost their formation. They mixed together. Everyone raised their weapons and chopped at the people around them. At the same time, they had to prevent themselves from being attacked. The attack could come from the front or from the side. Now anyone who appeared in front of them was an enemy. Seeing this scene, the audience's violent factors were aroused. They cheered and vented as if they were also a part of the melee. Every time a knight was shot down, there would be many shrill screams, as if they were the ones who were knocked to the ground. It seemed that they were so devoted. Looking at these fanatical people, Kai always had a sense of unreality. Most of these people were honest citizens. They used to look submissive. When they saw nobles and knights from a distance, they would bow and salute, not daring to be rude at all. But here, they were completely different, and they were full of dirty words and slang. With a crazy look, he shouted and cursed at those noble knights, wishing he could fight them for 300 rounds himself. Such a contrast was too great. Perhaps because this was the only moment they could put themselves above the knights. The melee of more than 100 knights looked magnificent, but in fact the number of people decreased very quickly. In less than 3 minutes, 50 or 60 knights had been rescued by the soldiers outside regardless of the danger. At least half of them were trampled by war horses. Thanks to the Celts' amazing physical fitness, no major tragedy occurred. Even so, 10 people died from being trampled. Gaius was already busy at this time. He took the pharmacist's summon from Camelot to shuttle among the wounded to see which ones were beyond rescue and which ones could still be rescued. After turning over the wounds of several knights, Gaius's face changed immediately. He found some unusual wounds, some of which were obviously caused by sharp weapons, and some knight's armor was even directly cut open. This is definitely not a wound that can be left by ordinary weapons, but the problem is that even sharp swords are not allowed to be brought into the knight's melee, so how could such a sharp weapon appear? Thinking of this, Gaius called on the pharmacist's summon from the city to save people, and turned to report the matter to King Uther. Arthur rode on his horse and slashed a knight who intended to attack him. Although he was holding a blunt weapon in his hand, the huge force still made the knight fall off his horse. In a knight's melee, generally speaking, if a knight is knocked off his horse, he is basically out. Although there is no such provision in the rules, most knights follow this unspoken rule. Because in a knight's melee, the knights are all dressed tightly like tin cans. If they fall off their horses like this, they basically become living targets for others. So Arthur did not pursue the victory, but the moment he turned his head, a long sword flew out from nowhere. It hit his helmet all at once. Maybe because the battle was too intense, Arthur's helmet was loose and was knocked off by this. Now everyone knows that he is Arthur. The audience was also surprised that the prince actually participated in the knight melee. Think about it, the prince has won the knights tournament and has qualified for the finals of the lance competition. Now he is participating in the knight melee. Obviously, Arthur wants to win the title of champion knight. So the cheers shook the earth immediately. This cheer certainly represents the support and love of the people for Arthur, but in this environment, it is completely a pitfall for Arthur. The knights who were still fighting were reminded by the audience and immediately found Arthur and immediately regarded him as the #1 target. In an instant, more than 5 knights targeted our Prince Arthur. Fortunately, as a prince, Arthur still has a little privilege. because there were also knights from Camelot participating in the melee. Although their number was not large, when they saw their prince being besieged, these knights immediately and decisively abandoned their opponents and attacked the knights who were besieging Arthur. Unfortunately, the number of Camelot knights does not have a numerical advantage over contestants from other places. On the contrary, they are at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. After all, this is a competition facing the entire Celtic countries. The participating knights of Camelot may have an advantage in number compared to a single country, but compared with the entire Celtic countries, the disadvantage is very obvious. Chapter 97 Exposed. Being outnumbered, the knights of Camelot were soon defeated and fell off their horses. On the other side, Gaius also came to the main stand. "Are you telling the truth?" King Uther said with a sullen face. Morgana, who was watching the game nervously, immediately turned her head to look at Gaius and King Uther. King Uther's voice was too loud just now. "What happened?" Kai, who was sitting next to Morgana, also turned his head to look over. Gaius looked at King Uther and found that he had no intention of hiding anything. So he said, "Someone brought sharp weapons to the competition. When I was treating the wounded just now, I found that many people had wounds caused by sharp weapons." Kai's face changed suddenly. "Are you sure?" Although Kai did not personally participate in the inspection of the weapons, in this regard, it was jointly presided over by Knight Lion and Knight Perrinor. The character of these two is absolutely trustworthy, and it is impossible for them to make mistakes. If what Gaius said is true, then the problem is serious. To put it mildly, it can be said that they are dereliction of duty. Don't underestimate this charge. It is definitely a very serious accusation, especially for a knight, because it can be extended to disloyalty. If it is more serious, it is betrayal. Knight Lion is the knight that Gaius trusts the most, and Knight Perrinor has always been valued by Kai. If these two people betray, who else can be trusted? Absolutely true, Gaius said solemnly. In fact, Kai did not believe that Gaius would deceive them on such a serious issue. "Call Lion and Perrinor over. By the way, before they come, let them see the wounds first," King Uther said with a sullen face and gritted teeth. "If this is true, Lion and Perrinor will disappoint him too much?" Kai also nodded silently. But Morgana on the side could not understand their logic. "Is it time to hold someone accountable now? Shouldn't they stop the game?" "We should stop the game immediately. Instead of holding someone accountable here." No. King Uther and Kai refused at the same time. King Uther glanced at Kai and asked him to explain. "Morgana, look at the situation of the game before you say that." On the field, the knights of Camelot had been completely destroyed, but the other knights were not much better. After all, those knights came from all over the world, and they had no tacit understanding or organization. They just aimed at Arthur as their first target. But as far as they were concerned, they were also enemies of each other. So when they attacked Arthur in groups, they were also fighting among themselves. With the help of the Knights of Camelot, Arthur survived the most dangerous period. In addition, his own strength was originally very strong, so after a few rounds, although Arthur lost his helpers, his opponents also decreased a lot. "What's wrong?" Morgana asked puzzled. "Arthur is at a disadvantage," Kai said helplessly. If Arthur had not been exposed, or if Arthur was in an advantageous position, Kai and King Uther would have called a halt long ago. After all, it was their fault that this problem had arisen. Calling a halt and letting Arthur withdraw from the game was also an explanation for them. But what about now? Arthur was exposed and was at a disadvantage. If the game was called off now, no matter what the reason, Camelot's reputation would be ruined. Others would only say that Camelot was protecting Arthur. This was human nature. And Morgana was still lacking experience in this area. What about Arthur's safety? But Morgana was very smart. She didn't understand it before and didn't think about it. Now, after Kai's reminder, she immediately understood the seriousness of the matter. If the game was really called off at this time, Camelot's reputation would be damaged on the one hand, and Arthur's own reputation would also be severely hit. From then on, others would say that Arthur was a coward and not a knight. This was definitely a very serious accusation. This era was dominated by the spirit of chivalry. A prince who was spurned by the public and had no courage was destined not to become a king. But even if she understood it, it was impossible for Morgana to ignore Arthur's safety. "Don't worry, I'm here." Although Kai couldn't intervene in the game, the problem was that if Arthur was really in danger, Kai couldn't just sit back and watch. After all, Arthur's other identity was the crown prince, and he still had the privilege of saving his life. It's great to admit defeat. If someone still chases you like this, it can only mean that someone has other intentions. Morgana is still worried, but now all she can do is stare at the stadium. Pray that Arthur will be safe. On the other side, there are also two groups of people watching the game. Talon and Morgause. But their ideas are completely different. In Morgause's view, Talon's people are trash. When Morgause found that Talon's people were killing people in the crowd, he almost cursed. Killing Arthur in the melee is the main purpose, but those two idiots pretending to be Senate knights actually attacked other knights in this situation. Isn't this deliberately exposing themselves? When Morgause saw Gaius going to the main stand, he knew that the plan of these idiots had failed. King Uther and Kai would never sit idly by after knowing that it was not right. Once Arthur was really in danger, Kai would definitely take action. At that time, those two idiots would definitely dream of killing Arthur. Fortunately, although these idiots messed up such a good opportunity, it did not affect her original plan. All she had to do now was to follow her own plan. But Talon thought differently from Morgause. When he saw that his people had begun to approach Arthur, he almost laughed out loud. Soon, Uther, you will taste the pain of losing your loved ones. But don't worry, this is just the beginning. I will make you regret your atrocities even if you go to hell. Arthur was already in a tough battle. He kept moving around to prevent himself from being surrounded by opponents and using space to gain advantages. As long as he didn't face three enemies at once, Arthur thought he could still hold on. It must be said that Arthur's approach was indeed effective. Although it looked very embarrassed, at least he had no problem for the time being. But the two fake Senate knights were already impatient. It stands to reason that Arthur was the enemy of all of them, and everyone should kill Arthur first and then decide the winner, but in reality it was not the case at all. These guys had their own little tricks. While they were dealing with Arthur, they were also attacking other competitors so that they could win. So the two Senate knights were harassed by the other knights. They wanted to kill Arthur, but the others kept attacking them, so they couldn't concentrate on dealing with Arthur. Seeing this situation, the two Senate knights decided to clear the field first and deal with Arthur last. So the two fake Senate knights immediately turned their horses around and killed the others. But their action made another knight in the arena see something wrong. That was Gawain, who had been participating but had no sense of presence. Chapter 98 Help. Thanks to the rewards from Cabbage Stew, The Pope Must Die, Brother Die's Own People, and Book Friend 170,205,202,107,877, Gawain looks simple and reckless, but he is not stupid at all. He knows that if he wants to win the knight melee alone, he must pay attention to strategy. It is definitely the stupidest way to rush into the enemy camp and kill them all at the beginning. No matter how good a person is, he can't beat hundreds of people. In such a group fight, the role of personal ability is weakened to the minimum. So, Gawain changed his previous style of liking to show off. From the beginning of the battle, he was very sneaky and wandered around the periphery. He didn't do entanglement, but played guerrilla warfare. Anyway, knocking down one is one, and he will never show off. Originally, Gawain had a good idea, but when he got to the arena, he found that other people were not stupid either. There were many people who thought the same as him, so Gawain didn't get much advantage. But all this changed after Arthur was exposed. Those who were determined to take advantage of Arthur like Gawain rushed to him like a vicious dog seeing a bone, as if they wanted to eat him alive. Gawain was calm. Although he also followed a trend to beat Arthur, he still hung around on the periphery and didn't show off. But when he saw the strangeness of the two Senate knights, Gawain couldn't sit back and watch. Originally, everyone was very happy to beat each other with blunt weapons, which was in line with the rules. Even if Gawain was cunning, it was within the rules. The melee itself encouraged the knights to use various means, and the strategy itself was a kind of strength. But these two knights were different, they cheated. Although there were no specific rules for the melee, even in the future unlimited fighting, there were rules not to attack the crotch and the back of the head, not to mention the knight melee. In short, heavy weapons and sharp weapons were absolutely not allowed to appear in the duel field. But Gawain saw clearly that the weapons of these two men were more than just sharp. He saw with his own eyes that a knight was slashed in the abdomen by a sword. If it was an unopened long sword, it would be like being hit by a stick. Although it would be painful, it would definitely not make people's skin and flesh torn and bleed. The knight was wearing armor, and a blunt sword could cut through the armor. This was obviously a foul on their part. More importantly, these two people were too ruthless. They were not looking to disintegrate the fighting power of others, they were just going for killing people, and they were very ruthless. If Gawain really wanted to say, he was a bit like the unruly knight in martial arts novels. Maybe he was a little unpopular with decent people in small matters, but he was very upright in big matters. Of course, it was impossible to let these people go. So before these two senates could get close to Arthur, they were intercepted by Gawain. But these two people had sharp weapons in their hands, while Gawain had blunt weapons, so they naturally had the upper hand. On the other side, Arthur finally made some progress in the fight, because the number of his enemies had dropped to an acceptable level, so Arthur simply confronted them head-on, relying on his own skills to fight several opponents. The two senates saw Arthur taking care of the others at a very fast speed, and they immediately couldn't sit still. So they attacked Gawain's horse without any scruples. Gawain was already at a disadvantage when he was fighting 1 against 2, and now these two people were so careless, so he naturally suffered a great loss. He accidentally injured his horse, and the horse went crazy and threw Gawain off. After the two men dealt with Gawain, they did not kill Gawain, but rushed towards Arthur. Arthur had just dealt with a knight, and immediately found 2 knights riding horses towards him. Arthur didn't know that so many plots had happened before, so he took it too seriously and responded at his own pace. He did not retreat, but rode his horse towards the 2 people who were rushing towards him. At the critical moment, Arthur made an iron horse bridge on his horse and narrowly avoided the attack of the 2 people. At the moment when the 2 people brushed against each other, he turned around and knocked down one of them. Then he ignored the 2 people and continued to fight with other enemies. Unexpectedly, just when Arthur focused on a knight in confrontation, the one who fell off the horse of the 2 senate knights climbed up from the ground. The knight approached Arthur, jumped up suddenly, hugged him and pulled him off the horse. Arthur was a little dazed by the fall. Seeing this scene, everyone in the stand stood up worriedly, including the royal family. Arthur was stunned by the fall, and the senate knight who pulled Arthur down did not miss this opportunity. He raised his sword with both hands and was about to pierce Arthur's head. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Arthur rolled over and dodged the sword. The senate knight wanted to pursue the victory, but other knights in the arena happened to come to make trouble and blocked his pursuit. There was no way. The senate knight could only clean up these troublemakers first. He hoped that his companions could complete the task. And his companions did not disappoint him. The senate knight who did not fall off his horse had already turned his horse and rushed towards Arthur again. But at this time, Gawain got a horse from nowhere, rode again, and directly stopped the senate knight. Arthur also noticed the situation here. He could see that this knight really helped him, but he didn't know who it was. He thought it was a Camelot knight. But even so, Arthur didn't have time to pay attention to this knight anymore, because other contestants came up again. The 2 senate knights now understood that the knights who were still on the field were already a burden to them. Instead of leaving them to make trouble, it would be better to clear the field quickly. After about 3 minutes, the knights were defeated and fell. Even Gawain fell off his horse again in the final melee. This time he fell too hard. Gawain got up, his head was dizzy, and he could only kneel on one knee to rest. At this time, only 2 senate knights and Arthur were still confronting each other in the duel. But the situation was still not optimistic. The 2 men worked together to deal with Arthur, and Arthur had a hard time dealing with it. The blunt sword he used could not hurt anyone at all, while the 2 men were holding killing swords, and only 1 stab was needed to kill Arthur. Although the martial arts of these 2 people were not as solid and regular as Arthur, they were ruthless and cooperated tacitly. As you come and go, Arthur fell into danger again and again, and almost died several times. Seeing Arthur being besieged by 2 people, Gawain finally struggled to stand up, tremblingly joined the battle of the 3, and took the initiative to help Arthur bear part of the attack back-to-back with Arthur. Even King Uther was surprised. Who helped Arthur? I don't know, but no matter who it was, we should thank him, Gaius shrugged and said with a little relief. Chapter 99, Victory. Although they were thankful, the situation on the scene was not good. At least that was the case for Arthur and Gawain. Arthur was the target of public criticism. After fighting till now, he was exhausted both physically and mentally. Gawain was not in a good condition either. He had fallen off his horse twice, and both were serious. So he was not in a good condition. The 2 senate knights were in a much better condition. With the help of the sword of Starlin, they were much better than Arthur and his knights in fighting the enemy. Arthur and his knights had to hit the enemy several times with a blunt sword to be effective, but they could often kill with one blow. That was the difference. Gawain and Arthur were each fighting against an enemy, and now they were in a tough battle. Arthur was not in a good situation. He was hit on the leg by a sword. Although his muscles and bones were not injured, the wound was bleeding, which greatly consumed his physical strength. So now it should be said that Gawain has been protecting Arthur, while Arthur can only barely fight back. Kai, who do you think will win? King Uther was already sitting in his seat. He was no longer worried and asked with interest. After all, things were easier to handle now. There were only 4 people on the field. Once there was a problem, Kai could save the situation immediately, instead of being in a mess like before. Kai was very likely to be unable to save the situation in time. Kai squinted his eyes and looked at the situation on the field. He shook his head and said, "It's hard to say. Arthur is still a little naive. If he had handled it better before, this situation would never have happened. Arthur didn't deserve to lose this time. Kai personally trained Arthur. Kai never kept his secrets from him. It was just that he was limited by Arthur's understanding ability. He couldn't really learn the essence of Bachikwan and other martial arts. The gap in thinking between the East and the West could not be bridged until the 21st century, let alone now. But Arthur was a practical man, and what he learned was enough for him. Arthur had previously limited himself to the thinking of a knight, and many things had not been brought into play, which led to the current embarrassment. As for Kai saying that Arthur lost now, there is a reason. After all, anyone with a discerning eye can see that if it weren't for that unknown knight helping Arthur, Arthur would have been eliminated long ago, and there is no point in talking about winning. In addition, the problems that occurred in this melee must be explained anyway, so even if Arthur wins, he still loses. King Uther also means this, but he is still a little unwilling. If it weren't for this incident, the title of champion knight would have been taken by Camelot again 10 years later, but now. Thinking of this, King Uther glanced at Peregrine and Lion who were standing aside with their heads bowed, and his mood was very bad. Peregrine and Lion also lowered their heads and didn't dare to look at King Uther at all. They never thought that such a big leak would appear under their noses. This is a serious dereliction of duty. Fortunately, Kai saw some clues and let them reduce their responsibilities a little, otherwise they probably wouldn't have the face to stand here anymore. At this time, the situation on the field suddenly changed. The unknown knight, Gawain, knocked away the sword of a Senate knight. Turning the situation on the field, Gawain took the opponent's sword and cut off the opponent's neck with his backhand. At this time, Arthur also held the sword of another Senate knight, allowing Gawain to pierce his chest with a sword. King Uther saw this scene and stood up directly. He was an avid fan of knight duels, and Gawain's move just now was so beautiful. He couldn't help but cheer for it. The audience was the same. Although they didn't see some details clearly, they were very satisfied with the reversal between lightning and fire. "Who are you?" Arthur half knelt on the ground, panting. When the knight heard this, he took off his helmet. It was Gawain. The moment Gawain took off his helmet, the audience exploded immediately. The duel between Gawain and Arthur yesterday is still memorable. Unexpectedly, they entered the final duel again today. This is like fate. Is there a more dramatic encounter than this? What? Do you want to fight again? Gawain enjoyed the cheers from the surroundings. He liked this kind of grand scene very much. Arthur looked at him with a complicated expression, then looked at the starlin sword in his hand and shook his head. He knelt on one knee, held the long sword in his hand with both hands, and presented it to Gawain. This is the most solemn etiquette in the etiquette of knights. It is often used when knights pledge allegiance to their lords, indicating complete submission. You saved me. Knights don't have the tradition of swinging swords at benefactors. You deserve this victory. Arthur certainly did not surrender by doing this. He was showing Gawain that he wholeheartedly offered his respect to the victor, which was basically the highest courtesy between knights. On the contrary, Gawain was a little flustered by this. He didn't expect Arthur to be so straightforward and so grand. If Gawain had some prejudice against Arthur before, now Gawain has completely changed his mind about Arthur. King Uther took the lead and walked to the front of the stands and applauded. King Uther was naturally convinced by Gawain's performance. He saved his own son. How could a father not be grateful? What made King Uther even more pleased was Arthur's handling of the matter. This might be out of Arthur's heart, but the effect of doing so was more shocking than Arthur's victory. After this incident, it is estimated that all countries will soon sing Arthur's deeds. This is more beautiful than simply winning. But, tomorrow. Victory will still be mine. After Gawain took over Arthur's sword, Arthur was not discouraged by this failure, but his fighting spirit was even higher. Gawain was not angry about this, but felt very good about it. Humph. Then wait and see. After the knights' melee ended, King Uther immediately investigated the identities and origins of the two knights, and found that these two people were not knights from Senate at all. They were members of the Tauren rebels. They killed the original two Senate knights, and then used magic props to disguise themselves as the two knights and sneaked into the knights' meeting. Their swords were also made of magic. They looked unbladed, but they were sharper than ordinary swords. This discovery made King Uther furious. Rebels and magic, the two things King Uther hated the most, were actually mixed together. If Kai and Gaius hadn't said that the Knights' Conference had not yet ended and it was not appropriate to make this matter a big deal, King Uther would have wanted to search the entire city immediately, even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground to find these rebels and kill them. Chapter 100 Lance Finals. In the arena in Camelot, today is the last day of the Knights' Conference, and it is also the final of the lance competition that everyone is looking forward to. At the same time, this is also the most anticipated duel of this Knights' Conference, Prince Arthur versus Knight Gawain. These two have been entangled until now, and every time they enter the final duel, they have a sense of fateful enemies between them. Accompanied by the sound of horns, the two contestants, wearing shining armor and riding tall war horses, walked past the stands. Behind them were attendants or servants holding flags, and the audience on both sides did not hesitate to cheer and applaud. In order to ensure that the last final was not boring, King Uther specially ordered to reward Gawain with a new war horse, armor and 10 servants, which made the opening of the two look less disparate. Otherwise, with Gawain's current financial situation, let alone servants and attendants, he didn't even have a war horse, so what was the final? In fact, the audience didn't care about these details at all. After seeing Gawain and Arthur, they immediately became extremely enthusiastic. The two men's 2 consecutive wonderful performances have won them countless fans. The sun was high in the sky, and the golden sunlight was shining on the arena. The enthusiasm of the audience under the sun made the temperature of the venue seem to have returned to midsummer, and it was so hot that people were sweating profusely. Arthur and Gawain rode to the two ends of the runway. The climax of the entire night conference, the final of the lance competition, was about to begin. The audience poured all their enthusiasm into this final battle, cheering the names of the two knights loudly. After the routine safety inquiries, Arthur and Gawain both took off their gorgeous cloaks, put on helmets, and rode their horses to the scheduled starting point of the competition. At this moment, everyone held their breath, and the climax had arrived. With the help of the attendants, the two knights fixed their shields with their left hands and picked up the cork lances with their right hands. After that, they both knocked on their shields with their lances, indicating that the referee could start the game. The horn representing the charge sounded. The two knights used the spurs on their heels to stimulate the horses to accelerate the charge. Bang, bang, the two horses crossed each other so fast that it was almost impossible to see what happened. Only the flying sawdust proved the confrontation between the two knights. The first round seemed to be evenly matched. The spectators cheered in unison, but those who knew the matter could see the problem. It seems that Arthur is not in good condition. Kai applauded along with the crowd and said to King Uther, "Arthur was injured in the knight's melee yesterday. Not only was there a cut on his thigh, but his body was also covered with scars and bruises." When Morgana saw this, she tried her best to stop Arthur from continuing to participate. On the contrary, Uther and Kai didn't care much about it. They were all born as knights. In their opinion, it was normal for a man to be injured. If he couldn't even overcome this little pain, then what was the point of being a knight? He might as well stay at home and be a parasite. Arthur himself also meant this. How could a man back down because of a small problem? Well, if Gawain was not just testing in the first round, Arthur would have suffered. King Uther also agreed with Kay's judgment. When King Uther was young, he was also a famous knight in the kingdom. Now that he is old and strengthening his muscles and bones, his eyesight has become more sophisticated. After what happened yesterday, Arthur has lost the possibility of winning the title of champion knight. King Uther's mood has also become much calmer, and he can comment on this game calmly. The lance competition is different from the foot battle. It relies more on skills. Arthur's advantage in strength is basically useless. In contrast, Gawain, who is in better condition, has an advantage. Is Arthur really okay? Morgana didn't care about who was better in martial arts. She was more concerned about Arthur's safety. It will be fine. From what happened yesterday, it can be seen that Gawain is a real knight. Arthur will not be in any danger. On this side, Arthur controlled the warhorse and was very grateful. If it weren't for the first round of testing and Gawain himself was reserved, Arthur would have a lot of problems in the first round. After understanding this, Arthur immediately realized that he had to adjust his strategy. Because of the injury yesterday, his right hand holding the spear became less flexible. So if he wanted to fight on the offensive, he would be at a great disadvantage. The lance competition is more about skills and physical flexibility. Gawain is now better than Arthur in terms of riding and lance accuracy. Because of the relationship of horse fighting, Gawain's weakness and strength can be completely ignored. After all, the power of the lance collision does not rely on the knight. As long as it hits the right place at the right time, the lance can cause great damage with the impact of the warhorse. So Arthur can only focus on defense and compete with Gawain to see who is more resilient. Soon, the second round of charge began. The two rushed towards each other again across the railing. Bang, bang. In the second round of sprint, the two lances broke again, and wood chips flew everywhere. The audience liked this scene. The two were still tied. But professionals like Kai naturally saw the difference. Arthur obviously changed his strategy. He did not take the initiative to attack, but used the shield more to defend. This can be seen from Arthur's moving shield to defend and hiding Gawain a beat later. Arthur is now stabilizing himself first, and then waiting for an opportunity to attack. Although this seems very passive, it is in line with Arthur's current situation. King Uther also saw that Arthur's desire to attack was rapidly declining, and he began to focus on defense. King Uther was not disappointed. On the contrary, King Uther was very happy to see that Arthur could play to his strengths and avoid his weaknesses according to his own conditions. Although there are also great risks in doing so, everyone knows that if you defend too long, you will lose, but now is undoubtedly the most suitable strategy for Arthur. Now King Uther can only hope that Arthur can hold on until Gawain reveals a flaw. Bang, bang, two loud noises came almost at the same time. Arthur and Gawain hit each other's shields again, the lance broke, and wood chips burst out. Before the flying wood chips fell, the knight on the horse had already run to the end of the track, turned his horse's head, and prepared to launch the next round of attack. This is the 19th collision. No one in the audience could sit in their seats. Everyone stood up because of this century-long duel, stretching their necks to watch every detail. When the collision occurred, the two knights ran to the end of the track peacefully. The cheers of men and the screams of women resounded throughout the stadium again. Arthur panted, moved his sore left hand, and then opened the mask of his helmet to breathe. Sweat had soaked Arthur's whole body, and his hair had all fallen down because of sweat, blocking his vision. It's winter now. You can imagine how fierce Arthur's duel was. The servants on the side immediately took out a towel and a water bottle. Arthur took the towel and wiped his face randomly, then took the water bottle and drank a lot of water. But his eyes never left his opponent. After 19 consecutive sprints, Arthur's lances broke 11, and Gawain's lances were all broken. From this point of view, there is no doubt that Gawain has an absolute advantage. Fortunately, the Knights of Camelot do not use this to calculate the results. The nobles of the Knights of Camelot are very simple and rough. Unless one party surrenders or is knocked down, there is no winner. Like knight competitions and other places, the number of hits, the location of the hits, and the number of lance breaks are used to calculate the small points to determine the winner. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.